Good morning. This is the Colorado Energy and Carbon Management Commission weekly business agenda. It is Wednesday, August 14th, 2024, and it is 9 a.m. We will start with a roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Ackerman.
Here.
Commissioner Cross.
Present.
Commissioner Mesner.
Here.
Commissioner Oath.
Here.
Commissioner Ogletree. Commissioner Robbins.
Here.
Chair, you have 5 of 7 commissioners present.
Very good. That is a quorum. We are authorized to do business. We will launch into our hearing. The first order of business is commissioner comments. This is an opportunity for commissioners to apprise themselves and the world on things that are happening in their world as a seated commissioner. Any comments? That's because we're all really busy. We just finished up the deep geothermal rulemaking. We're all getting prepared for a few weeks of cumulative impacts rulemaking starting on September 3rd. And just for the order of the calls, we also this fall still have carbon capture and sequestration rulemaking and produced water rulemaking. And that is all of the rulemakings on top of general business as we continue to process various orders for the commission. With that, public comment is next. I would note that we only had one person sign up for public comment. That is Adams County Commissioner Emma Pinter. And Ms. Pinter has been alerted to the fact that since her public comment is related to a specific docket, the Renegade variance, we may be able to hear from her at the time we hear that docket. Moving on, we move to docket 230800269. This is an enforcement matter involving Prospect Energy. I believe we're going to hear from Caitlin Stafford from the AG's office. Good morning, Ms. Stafford. Am I correct that you're going to present a bit?
Good morning. Yes, that's my understanding, Chair Robbins. If you had additional instructions for me a few seconds ago, I did not hear them as I was being promoted.
Nope, just other than to recognize that you're going to speak to us a bit about this docket.
Okay. Well, I don't have a PowerPoint presentation for you all, but I am here to briefly give some remarks on this particular enforcement matter. And then if you all have any questions, I'm happy to take those as well. So for the record, my name is Caitlin Stafford. I'm a Senior Assistant Attorney General, and I'm here on behalf of ECMC staff. The docket that you have in front of you, this is an enforcement matter involving violations of several ECMC rules as set forth in the stipulated order finding violation that was contained in your hearing portfolio. As you're well aware, ECMC rules set forth the process whereby resolution of an enforcement matter may come before a commission hearing officer who can then issue a recommended order for an AOC, OFE, or is here an SOFE. And this Prospect SOFE has been recommended for approval by the hearing officer in this matter. So what that means is no action is required by you commissioners here. Since this SOFE has been recommended for approval by the hearing officer, it will become a final order of the commission pursuant to Rule 520B if you take no action. So I'll move to a little bit of the background, sort of how we got to this SOFE. I know this is a bit of a unique situation. We don't typically put on full presentations on AOCs and SOFEs for you. But this is to ensure that you commissioners and the public are fully informed about this important matter. So I'll turn to the background for this particular matter. Prospect is an operator in Larimer County. Its wells and locations are largely older and low producing. Over the past decade or so, significant residential development has occurred in the area close to Prospect's locations. And as a result of that, Prospect's operations have become the subject of multiple and sustained complaints by residents in the area, as well as some Fort Collins and Larimer County officials. ECMC and Prospect, did I lose you?
I think we're all still here.
Okay, Sorry. ECMC and Prospect recently entered into this stipulated order finding violation to resolve multiple violations of ECMC rules pertaining to flaring gas during production activities at Prospect's Hearth Fire location, and the failure at multiple wells to conduct annual braid and hen testing. This is testing that's essential to identifying issues related to well surface casing pressure. So this SOFV resolves multiple violations contained in 2 dockets, which were consolidated. So 2308-00269 and 2401-00006. So these dockets were consolidated to promote administrative efficiency, and I'll just briefly summarize those violations. So the first docket, the flaring violations, those were originally part of the number docket 2308-00269. ECMC received a formal complaint from Larimer County regarding alleged flaring at Prospect's Hearth Fire location, and following confirmation of such flaring, a notice of alleged violation was issued to Prospect, and staff pursued that NOAV through the enforcement process. The second docket, 2401-00006, was originally noticed to resolve multiple allegations of missing braid and head testing at multiple wells over the course of a couple of years. And as is set forth in the stipulated order finding violation, these allegations were largely contained in 2 specific NOAVs. Now, enforcement staff originally pursued these matters as candidates for administrative orders on consent, which you commonly understand as an administrative settlement that becomes a final order of the commission. However, there were some factors that led to a change in course as we sort of progressed through this process. First, Prospect indicated it lacked an ability to pay the calculated penalties, and it submitted financial documentation in support of that position. The inability to pay process, as you're aware, is set forth in ECMC's enforcement guidance and penalty policy. I think it begins around page 27. And as part of that process, the operator is required to submit a certified written summary regarding its revenues, liabilities, and assets, and attach supporting financial documentation like financial statements and tax returns. The second piece of this is that ECMC also became aware that Prospect had entered into what is called a compliance order on consent with the Air Pollution Control Division to settle various air pollution violations at a different Prospect location. That COC included a substantial penalty payment. And third, the director had to take additional measures to compel Prospect to correct its flaring issues at the Hearth Fire well, and issued a Director's Rule 901A order, which required Prospect to shut in the well in February 2024. So in acknowledgement of all these factors, enforcement staff discussed the possibility of entering into this SOFB with Prospect, whereby Prospect's ability to continue to operate would be terminated. Its principal owner would be prohibited from conducting future oil and gas operations without permission from this commission, and its wells would be absorbed into the Orphan Well program. The SOFB was executed on July 10th, 2024, and following the hearing officer review hearing, the hearing officer's order recommending approval of the SOFB was issued last week, August 7th. So with that, I'll try to share my screen here. Just wanted to briefly walk you through the penalty table here. So if you'll bear with me for one moment. Can you all see my screen? If
Yes.
I'm sure it's kind of small, so I'll try to make it a little bit bigger there.
Yeah, that's good.
Thanks. So again, would like to draw your attention to the penalty table here. This is you see these in all of the AOCs, SOFVs, OFVs that have come before the commission before. So we have the penalty calculation here, along with the terms of the SOFV, which the hearing officer, as I mentioned, recommended for approval. So is this table in the explanatory language below, which this begins on page 6 of the SOFV, page 13 of the PDF, if you're looking at the combined recommended order, and SOFV PDF. So staff calculated an approximate $1.7 million penalty for the flaring and Braden head testing violations. So this is the calculated penalty for both dockets here. As you can see, the flaring violations, those were close to $600 or around $650,000 by themselves, calculated as set forth here. So this penalty was calculated utilizing the duration matrix, and that is set forth in ECMC Rule 525, and it's also more fully explained in the enforcement guidance and penalty policy. Now, as I mentioned, the terms of the order finding Prospect in violation of multiple ECMC rules. The order terms below here assess that penalty. I'm sorry if I'm scrolling too quickly there. Assess that penalty, but it is suspended contingent on Prospect stipulating that, as you can see, the director may revoke Prospect's operator number, revoke its ability to sell and transport product, and foreclose on its existing financial assurance. As I mentioned previously, Mr. Giltner, Prospect's principal owner, may not own, manage, or otherwise control an entity that conducts oil and gas operations in the state of Colorado unless and until he receives permission from this commission and remits the suspended $1.7 million penalty. And then the director is authorized to declare Prospect's facilities, locations, and wells as orphan sites and absorb them into the orphan well program. That language follows on page 12. So I will stop sharing here and move into some more concluding remarks here. So while the SOFE is not an ideal outcome in any situation, it is the best outcome that staff felt as it pertains to Prospect. Over the years, Prospect has demonstrated an inability to fully remedy its outstanding violations. Prospect has an enforcement history with ECMC, as recently detailed in one particular order, 1V809. And I want to say that, ECMC staff, it's always the goal for operators to be able to fulfill all of their obligations under the Oil and Gas Conservation Act, including being financially responsible for and completing work related to properly plugging and abandoning their facilities. However, it's clear Prospect is unable to do this, and it's hard to see a scenario where Prospect's facilities do not end up in the orphan well program at some point. So ECMC has the opportunity here through this SOFE to bring in Prospect's wells now through this SOFE, or potentially months, years down the road when they could be in worse conditions because of failure to maintain the facilities. Now, speaking of these particular outcomes, I'm aware this is likely not the only agreement that you've heard of in recent weeks involving Prospect. And I just want to make clear that we are all clear about the different orders and documents at play. There are about 4 of them. They're all independent of one another, and I'm just going to tick through them very quickly here. So first, as I previously mentioned, was that COC that Prospect entered into with APCD earlier this year to resolve violations of AQCC rules. And second, we have the stipulated order finding violation that I just walked through with you to resolve Prospect's violations of ECMC rules, which the hearing officer has issued that recommended order for. Third, there is a private agreement between Prospect and Larimer County relating to some particular well management issues. And there's another private agreement between Prospect and the city of Fort Collins. So they are all separate and independent of one another. So with that, I would like to finally wrap up my presentation for you. So before you today is an SOFE to resolve Prospect's multiple violations of ECMC rules. Again, it's been recommended for approval by the hearing officer following due consideration of the record, docket, and representations at the review hearing. And accordingly, pursuant to Rule 520B, the Commission does not need to take any action for this recommended order and SOFE to become final agency action. And as I stated, this is not the ideal outcome, but the provisions set forth in this SOFE will go a long way to ensuring protections to public health, safety, welfare, the environment, and wildlife resources, especially in those communities nearest to Prospect's operations. So I'd like to thank you for your time today, and I'm happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Stafford. You mentioned the two private agreements, one with Fort Collins and one with Larimer County. Can you provide perspective as to whether this recommended course of action is consistent with those private agreements, or ask alternatively whether Larimer and Fort Collins, while they may not be satisfied, are comfortable that this is the appropriate approach for at least ECMC?
I guess, Chair Robbins, are you asking if Larimer County and Fort Collins are okay with the SOFV? I'm not sure I'm following the question.
Sure. That's another way of asking the same question.
It has been my understanding, they have been part of this process because, as I mentioned, they filed a formal complaint in this matter. They have been participating in the docket. There have been no there have been no exceptions filed or any statements made to indicate that they are not in support of this SOFV.
And they would have had the opportunity to do so if they were so inclined, I assume, because I saw that Mr. Sura, representing both communities, was copied on the pleadings.
Yes, Chair Robbins, and both entities participated in the review hearing as well,
Okay.
where they could have raised concerns about anything they had regarding the SOFV.
Okay, great. Thank you. Further questions for AAG Stafford? Commissioner Oath?
Thank you, and thanks, Ms. Stafford, for that information. It's really helpful. I have a couple of questions. First off, just kind of from a general sense, can you explain for me the kind of difference between the two tools, between the AOC and the SOFV? Kind of what are the options or opportunities or the practical difference between utilizing one versus the other?
Thanks for that question, Commissioner Oath. So typically, so the AOC and the SOFV, they can look very similar. I can agree with that. But there are some different purposes there. With an administrative order on consent, that is an agreement that ultimately is approved by typically a hearing officer here. And there is a great chance that the operator will return to compliance. They are committing to return to compliance. And that is usually the outcome that staff is seeking in these particular enforcement situations. With the SOFV, this is a calculus made by staff that there is little to no chance that the operator will come back into compliance with the commission's rules, and a decision is reached that it may be better in the long run for that operator to cease operating. And that's where you see that particular language in the SOFV. That language really only exists in SOFVs and sometimes OFVs, where that language is utilized as well, where the director can suspend suspend certificates of clearance, terminate the operator's number, and foreclose financial assurance. So that essentially means the operator is shutting down.
Okay, thanks. That's helpful. And then I do have some questions around kind of the recommendation, or I guess what's in the SOFV in terms of I'm not going to say waiving, I forget the word that you utilize, but basically conditioning penalty, basically putting off the obligation to pay any penalty as opposed to kind of a reduced penalty based on the financial information provided, et cetera. You noted that per the ECMC's guidance, that financial documentation was provided by Prospect Energy to the staff, including, I think you said, like a summary, as well as supporting documentation, including tax documentation and whatnot. We haven't seen any of that, so I'd like to hear quite a bit more about kind of what the analysis was that went into a determination that Prospect could not pay any of that $1.7 million penalty, because that's a significant, hefty number for some pretty hefty violations from this entity. And in watching the review hearing, Prospect Energy indicated themselves that they were not going to be continuing operating anyways. So I think, an order that they're going to cease operating seemed like something they were already doing voluntarily and not something that is a kind of a big condition for ECMC to, kind of waive a significant penalty. So I want to understand that a lot more.
Sure. And I think probably the simplest answer to that question is, based on the information that was presented, I should mention all of that information must be certified by the operator. So if there's any indication there's any issues with that, there are different avenues to pursue other, I guess, relief there. But I will say this, at least with the suspension of the penalty there, the purpose is to ensure that, understanding the operator's financial condition and wherewithal, that they are able to put whatever remaining money they have into the last bits of compliance that they can commit. So here, that means ensuring the wells are properly shut in and not left in an unsafe condition before they are folded into the orphan well program, as we anticipate they will be. And also ensuring that any last remediation and cleanup, making as much progress on that as possible. And, I think that's staff's main goal, is to ensure that those things happen. And if we are seeking, that large sum of penalty, there's a concern that that might not happen. So understanding that this order tells Prospect that they will no longer operate in the state, staff wants to ensure that the assets they are leaving behind are in a safe condition, and that's the point there.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I certainly agree with that goal. But I guess what I'm trying to understand is, was there an assessment done of how much, how many assets and how many resources Prospect Energy has? How much is it going to cost for them to safely shut in these wells? And is that cost greater than the amount of assets that they have? Meaning that, again, a $1.7 million penalty is significant, but we also have the opportunity to sort of, in an agreement, push for a smaller penalty, an amount that can be afforded if there are additional assets that Prospect has beyond the cost of safely shutting in these wells.
Sure. And I think there, in staff's review of those financial statements, of those balance sheets, of the tax returns, yes, that evaluation was performed to see, okay, what can they afford to do in this situation? And basically the way that we came out here, and the way that a lot of these SOFVs tend to come out, is that the penalty amount will be suspended pursuant to the operator stipulating that, yes, we are all done. You can take our financial assurance, you can terminate our operator number. So there was a full evaluation of that occurred.
Okay, so I guess maybe just put another way, we're saying that the analysis was that Prospect had either only enough money to safely shut in these wells and no additional assets, or not even enough necessarily to safely shut them in, such that they would not have any resources to pay any penalty.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And then can you help me understand, just in my new role, the role here of the Orphan Well Program? And it seems, I think from my understanding from the materials, is that ultimately the cost here is a significant portion of the cost here to deal with these wells on an ongoing basis is going to become the responsibility of the state through the Orphan Well Program. And can you help me understand what the potential impact on that program as a whole from all of these wells going in without any additional resources paid by Prospect Energy through a penalty?
I appreciate your question. I will do my best to answer it, though. I think there might be, our orphan well manager might be in a better position to answer a question like that. But I will say, in foreclosing on Prospect's existing financial assurance, that will at least help with some of the cost of absorbing these particular assets into the orphan well program. But I can't speak to the specifics of how that program works.
Okay. Maybe I'll just ask one more question and let my fellow commissioners ask anything else that they have. Can you help me understand timing? I think I got the sense from watching the review hearing that there was a bit of a sense of urgency, maybe in particular on behalf of Larimer County and the city of Fort Collins, for this matter to be resolved. And is that your understanding as well? And if so, can you explain kind of what the timing considerations are?
I think with, I can't speak to what the city of Fort Collins and Larimer County's urgency with this particular matter. I can't speak to what their feelings are around that, but I do believe that ensuring this order is in place, as I mentioned, will go a long way to promoting, you know, a sort of a swift windup of these operations, such that the areas in which Prospect is currently operating, they will likely, you know, feel a lot better about the fact that these operations will no longer be continuing.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Further questions from commission? Ms. Stafford, you sort of indicated in your opening, as well as in response to questions from Commissioner Oath, that sort of, you know, while this is not the best outcome, it's likely kind of the only good outcome that is available for commissioners in terms of all the facts around this. Is that kind of an accurate sort of summary of where staff finds itself dealing with this operator?
Yeah, that is Chair Robbins. The SOFV route is not a route staff takes lightly. And it was determined in this particular matter to be, I guess, best case scenario.
And SOFV, for all those paying close attention, is stipulated order finding violation. Okay. Further questions? All right, I don't see further questions. And AG Davenport, if you would visualize yourself as our lawyer, I believe that provided the commissioners don't have concerns, we then don't need to take any action, because this would become an order of the commission without action by commissioners. Am I accurate there?
That's correct, Chair. Pursuant to our rules, when a hearing officer makes a recommended order in this situation on the merits, the rules provide that it will become a final order unless the commission takes action to stay it for further consideration or a party appeals it to the commission. I don't believe any party has appealed it to the commission, so unless the commission takes action today to stay this recommended order for further consideration, it will become a final order of the commission. In sum, if you take no action at all, it will become a final order of the commission. Your other option is to stay it. And what that would mean is that you would be setting it later for a more in-depth hearing, potentially looking at making changes to the SOFV, which may require it to go back to the parties as well. So if you stay it, there'll be significantly more process looking at potentially changing the terms of the SOFV.
Okay. And AG Davenport or Attorney General Stafford, routinely, these matters come before us on consent agenda and we don't actually have a presentation. Am I accurate in the fact that we had a presentation today was to be sort of transparent in the work that we're doing and, you know, acknowledge that several local governments had concerns, but that we've tried to work through a difficult situation and come to the best resolution that we could under our current rules? And is that why we undertook this circus this morning?
I'll answer if it's okay with
Go
AE
ahead.
Stafford. Thank you, Chair. I think that's accurate. This is while I think any stipulated OFV presents some potentially complicated facts and history. This one in particular with the folks involved and the complicated history and the number of other moving parts. I think the feeling was it might be beneficial to have a short presentation from enforcement staff's counsel and to be present as enforcement staff is always present for questions, but to make it very clear that the commission has an opportunity to ask questions.
Great. No, and I appreciate that. And circus was too harsh of a word. I appreciate that this has a lot of varying moving parts. Appreciate that ECMC is bound to take actions based upon the rules that we have in place, and that at times ECMC is forced into a position in which it's going to take over ownership of wells as being the best option. And I frankly appreciate the fact that our staff felt that rather than just put this on a consent and you know not elevate it to you know as much of a daylight as we've done, that we've done it this way. It shows a considered approach by our staff. It shows a lot of integrity and work on staff to come to a proposed resolution for commissioners to consider and to daylight that and make sure that everybody understands that you know we at times the end result is not the preferred result, but it's the best result. So, you know, I for one do not plan on needing to take any action on this, and I'm comfortable with this becoming an actual order of commission via silence of commissioners. Does any other commissioner desire to speak or otherwise do anything other than let this matter move forward? Commissioner Oath.
Thanks, Chair Robbins, and I would agree with everything that you said and echo everything that you said. I only want to add, you know, I don't love that the outcome in it, you know, I think this is a very complicated situation with a long history. And I agree with, you know, what the goals are here. I don't love that that we are suspending the entire penalty, but I am really appreciate that the staff did the analysis and that we had this opportunity to kind of really truly understand what went into kind of that analysis and that determination. And I think, you know, I worry about it from a precedent standpoint. And so just wanted to make the comment that in my mind, at least, this is a very unique situation and not one that I think we are likely to see repeat itself, in the sense that having an operator that has such significant violations with significant public health risks so close to and other sensitive receptors would have a penalty suspended. But I do think that in this very unique case that the information has been and the information is such that that's the right outcome here. So I also am fine with this moving forward without us taking additional action.
Any further discussion? All right. With that, Ms. Stafford, we really appreciate the work that you've done and all of staff has done. It's very much appreciated, and we will allow this matter to move forward, and it will become an order of the commission in, I think, 20 days or due course, whatever that may be.
Thank you, Chair
And-
Robbins,
All right.
and all the commissioners.
Yeah, sure. Okay, the next docket is 2402-00041. It's an oil and gas development plan for Cure McGee. Let's take 5 Excuse me. Let's return at 9:41, and between now and then, if we could get all the parties and their representatives up for us to consider. Thank you. All right, this is the Colorado Energy Carbon and Management Commission, August 14th hearing. We're now taking up docket 2402-00041, an oil and gas development plan. Kier McGee Oil and Gas Onshore LP is the applicant. Either Ms. Jost or Ms. Wazelinski are the attorneys of record. And we will first hear from Jason Maxey, the Director of Local Government Designee for Weld County. Mr. Maxey, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair Robbins, and good morning, Commissioners. As mentioned, my name is Jason Maxey, the Director for the Weld County Oil and Gas Energy Department. And as usual, we like to come before you all and say a few comments about the OGDPs that are within Weld County. So we appreciate the opportunity, as always, to speak to you for a few minutes about our process and some of the important milestones and factors that played into Weld County's review, specifically of Kier McGee's Philly OGDP in front of you this morning. The Philly OGDP is part of Kier McGee's Bronco CDP, or Comprehensive Development Plan for Weld County. A pre-application meeting for the overall CDP was held back in July of 2022 for the overall development. On August 5th, I wanted to call out August 5th of 2022, CPW conducted a field visit for the Bronco CDP area, and Weld County did attend that CPW field consultation. We are aware of multiple CPW consultations, as was mentioned in the director's recommendation, but I wanted you all to know that we did attend the one that was mentioned in August of 2022. The 1041 WOGLA hearing for the overall CDP was held in April of 2023 and was approved by the Weld County hearing officer. In our opinion, as you all have heard before, CDPs, and in your terminology, the CAPs, are good planning tools. From our perspective, we enjoy gaining further insight into future development plans for an area instead of just a one-off location. We're able to consider the full development area when looking at cumulative impacts or infrastructure-related type items. And we also appreciate that they create a public record of full phase development, which helps to prevent, from our standpoint, potential future land use conflicts. Once the overall CDP, along with the siting of these specific locations, has been approved through the Weld County 1041 process and heard by our hearing officer, the operator then submits site-specific 1041 WOGLA information, which details elements specific to each location. And those site-specific applications are intentionally submitted closer to the time of construction to avoid the need for multiple sundries or submittals as technology may advance. So the construction of these individual locations authorized by the CDP does not commence until we have issued a determination that, based on the site-specific, based on site-specific information submitted, the proposed location and BMPs are consistent with the information provided in the overall CDP application, and that they're compliant with the requirements of the Weld County Code. So site-specific conditions of approval or COAs could be included with our determination when necessitated by changes in the code or by changes in the surrounding land use. You all have heard this before, but our CDPs and our site-specific locations, when included in CDPs, are evergreen in nature, meaning that if we have a code change in between when it was approved and when the site-specific locations are evaluated, the operator commits to adhering to the latest version of code. As long as the site-specific 1041 WOGLA does not introduce any specific changes to a location that are significant, such as moving a location or expanding the surface disturbance or increasing the well count, then site-specific details are approved through an administrative process. So each of the individual locations under the Philly OGDP in front of you today have been administratively approved, and I wanted to mention the following dates. The Wall Street location was administratively approved on April 25th of 2024 and published in the Greeley Tribune on May 1st, 2024. 5 minutes to midnight was approved on May 3rd and published on May 10th. The midnight location was approved on May 7th and published on May 10th. And the Descent Fed was approved on May 29th and published on June 1st. We submitted 2A comments for all 4 of these locations in front of you today on June 26th of 2024. And with all those details being mentioned, Weld County has no further questions or concerns with the OGDP under your consideration today. We have already approved the 4 site-specific applications that have been submitted to Weld County, and we have read, received, and we support the director's recommendation for approval of this OGDP in front of you. I appreciate your time as always. Thank you very much, and happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Maxey. Questions for Mr. Maxey from commissioners? All right, seeing no questions, we appreciate your presence and participation with us this morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Jost, if you want to elevate your witnesses, we'll get started with swearing in of witnesses.
Great, thank you, Chair. If everyone can come on camera, that would be great. Mr. Davenport, we have a few. Right, it looks like Mr. Hess and Mr. Honus, can you please come on camera?
Does that look like everyone, Ms. Jost?
Yes, Mr. Davenport. We have everyone on camera but Mr. Honus, but he may be able to hear you when we're ready.
Okay. For all the witnesses, I'm going to ask you in turn to please raise your hand, state your name, and say that you swear to tell the truth. I'll call your name out, and we'll just go in the order that you appear on my screen. So we'll start with Ms. Coleman, please.
Julie Coleman, swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. Mr. Reimer, apologize for mispronunciations.
Joseph Reamer, I swear to tell the truth.
Mr. Landry.
Anthony Landry, I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. Mr. England.
Good morning, Eric England. I swear to tell the truth.
Mr. Garish.
Vince Garrett, I swear to tell the truth.
Mr. Picara.
John Picara, I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. Ms. Eichenberger.
Julia Eichenberger, I swear to tell the truth.
Mr. Hess.
William Hess, I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. And I believe Mr. Honus is our last witness.
Yeah, Mr. Davenport, sorry, it looks like we might have a little technical difficulty with Mr. Honus, but he is on the subject matter expert panel at the end. So maybe we can get him working at the end if he needs to speak.
Okay, I'll make a note. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Go ahead, Ms. Jost, you're recognized for your presentation.
Okay, wonderful, thank you. Ms. Coleman, can you please pull the PowerPoint up? Great, thank you very much. Well, good morning, Chair, Commissioners, staff, and members of the public. My name is Jamie Jost, and I, along with my partner, Kelsey Wieselinki, represent Kerr-McGee Oil and Gas Onshore LP in this docket 2402-00041 and the Philly OGDP application that was submitted to the Commission on February 6, 2024. The Philly OGDP application contains approximately 12,160 acres of minerals within the northern portion of Kerr-McGee's Bronco Comprehensive Area Plan that was approved by this commission on August 10th, 2022. Kerr-McGee would like to thank the ECMC staff and director for their hard work on this application, CPW and CDPHE for the consistent engagement and communication, as well as Weld County for its continued work on the local Bronco Comprehensive Development Plan and the corresponding WOGLOS for each of the oil and gas locations contained in this OGDP. Ms. Coleman, slide 3, please. As a refresher, the Bronco cap was approved by this commission in order number 407-3357 on August 10th, 2022. The order established an approximate 24,331.75 acre cap for the development of oil, gas, and associated hydrocarbons from the Niobrara, Fort Hays, Codell, and Carlisle formations. Order number 407-3357 provided that the Bronco cap will expire on August 10th, 2028, but the commission may extend the duration of the cap if Kerr-McGee submits an application and meet the requirements under Rule 314C2. The order also provided that Kerr-McGee has the exclusive right to develop the Niobrara, Fort Hays, Codell, and Carlisle formations within the Bronco Cap's boundary for the duration of the cap. The order also approved that any OGDP joint and spacing unit, Form 2A or Form 2 within the Bronco Cap's geographic boundaries will not expire until the Bronco Cap expires. A point of note is that Kerr-McGee was not required to separately evaluate cumulative impacts for any individual OGDP application proposed in the Bronco Cap. However, Kerr-McGee did provide a Form 2B for this Philly OGDP, and that will be discussed today. The order provided that Kerr-McGee will receive expedited review for any oil and gas development plan application within the CAP, and that Kerr-McGee would submit a comprehensive wildlife mitigation plan that's been prepared in formal consultation with CPW and the Commission prior to submitting Kerr-McGee's first OGDP application for the location within the CAP. Kerr-McGee did this with respect to its Colt OGDP application that was approved earlier this year and continues to comply with this requirement. And Mr. Reamer will address the comprehensive wildlife mitigation plan as it applies to the Philly OGDP in detail today. The order also provided that Commission staff may change the best management practices listed in the CAP exhibits for individual OGDP applications proposed within the Bronco CAP to BMPs that are as or more protective than the proposed CAP BMPs that were approved in August of 2022. The order also provided that staff could also add best management practices or conditions of approval to any individual OGDP applications proposed within the CAP that were beyond or in addition to the original CAP BMPs. Kerr-McGee will address the best management practices that will be applied to the oil and gas locations within the Philly OGDP today. And these best management practices were crafted in coordination and consultation with CPW, CDPHE, and Commission staff. In terms of the Philly OGDP submittal, Kerr-McGee complied with all notice requirements for the OGDP by providing written notice of the completeness determination, the application, notice of hearing, and corresponding exhibits to the interested parties, and they published the OGDP notice in Weld County. No formal petitions were filed, and the surface owner supports the development of the OGDP. Finally, the director determined that the Philly OGDP complies with all applicable requirements of the Commission's rules and recommends approval by the Commission. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. John Picara of Kerr-McGee to continue the presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Jost. Good morning, Chair Robbins and Commissioners. My name is John Picara. I'm a regulatory advisor with Kerr-McGee Oil and Gas Onshore LP. I appreciate the opportunity to present our Philly OGDP today and want to extend our thanks to the ECMC staff for working with us on this OGDP. In our presentation, we'll cover a variety of topics related to this OGDP, including the surface locations, development timelines, wildlife considerations, water recycling, and BMPs, among other topics listed here. We believe this is a responsible development plan for these locations. Next slide, please. The Bronco CAP was approved with 11 conceptual locations and up to 209 wells. Since the approval of the CAP, we were able to consolidate and remove 2 of those locations. Additionally, we reduced the total number of wells to 141. Kerr-McGee was granted a 6-year term and did not seek preliminary siting approval. Next slide, please. The Philly OGDP is the second of 2 OGDPs within the Bronco CAP. Philly is the northern OGDP, which is half or approximately 12,000 acres of the CAP. The southern OGDP, called the Colt OGDP, was approved in March of this year. The image on the left was taken from one of the CAP exhibits. The highlighted modifications of the 3 of the original 5 conceptual locations show how we worked with the surface owner, and we took into consideration comments from CPW, who asked for consolidation where possible. 2 of the locations were moved slightly to the west, and another location in the north of the OGDP was removed from the development plan. All wells in the north have been consolidated onto one location. The image on the right shows the locations proposed in this development plan. Next slide, please. The Philly OGDP consists of 4 locations and 74 wells. These locations are adjacent to an existing central road and utility corridor. The names of the locations are Wall Street Fed, 5 Minutes to Midnight, and Descent Fed. The number of wells on each location range from 17 to 22 wells. with 3 of the locations being smaller due to utilizing centralized facilities. The surface use agreement was executed with the single surface owner in April of 2022, while the cap was still under technical review with the ECMC staff. Weld County is the relevant local government for all locations, and there is no proximate local government. A couple months after approval of the cap, we received approval for the Weld County Comprehensive Development Plan. As Director Maxey mentioned, all 4 site-specific 1041 WOGLs associated with this OGDP have been approved. The proposed locations are in a remote area of Weld County, with the nearest residential building unit being approximately 2 miles away from the descent fed location. Other locations are even further from RBUs. All the locations are within Pronghorn Winter Concentration Area, HPH. Next slide, please. Access will be from the north off Highway 34, utilizing an existing road. Access to the locations will be constructed from that existing road. Oil and gas will be piped to 2 central facilities located on the 5 minutes to midnight and Hickory Miguel locations. Hickory Miguel location is part of the approved Colt OGDP. The effort to consolidate facilities into central locations allows others to undergo further reclamation. Next slide, please. The following illustrates the timeline from the planning stages through today. KMOG began working on a development plan for these lands in 2018 and have been working with the surface owner cooperatively since early 2019. The Bronco cap was submitted in December of 2021 and approved in August of 2022. After cap approval, KMOG submitted the comprehensive development plan to the Weld County Oil and Gas Energy Department. The CDP was approved in April of 2023. The Colt OGDP was approved in March of this year, and this OGDP was submitted in February. As noted in the slide, there were no public comments and no petitions filed against this OGDP, and the same can be said on the local permitting side for this entire development plan. Next slide, please. We anticipate beginning construction on the first location in this OGDP towards the end of 2025, followed by the second location, third, and so on consecutively. The same cadence is being proposed for drilling completions with year-round activity. To the extent practicable for pre-production activities, KMOG intends to drill and complete one location after the next in the OGDP while staying on the ranch, which minimizes the amount of traffic on and off ranch between locations. Pre-production operations are currently planned to begin at Wall Street Fed and work to the north. Next slide, please. As mentioned earlier, KMOG has been working with the single surface owner since 2019 and came to a mutually agreeable plan to develop the minerals beneath these lands. In early discussions with the surface owner, we contemplated upwards of 19 locations, but at the time of filing the Bronco cap, we were able to reduce that number of locations to 11, which the surface owner was agreeable to. Since cap approval and prior to filing the Colt OGDP, we took into consideration feedback from CPW and were able to further consolidate and reduce locations to a total of 9 and reduce the total number of wells. The surface owner is completely in support of this OGDP and associated timeframe for development. Next slide, please. KMOG consulted with CDPHE in August of 2022 for the cap and again in June of 2024 for this OGDP. All BMPs KMOG committed to for the cap were carried over to this OGDP, plus others we were previously unable to commit to. Examples include utilizing MLVTs, committing to completely tankless facilities, water recycling, and using Group 3 drilling mud. We've been working with an electrical provider in the area to ensure our facilities are run off grid power permanently. Due to the remoteness of this OGDP, we cannot commit to drilling on highline power, but continue to work towards this goal. KMOG has filed a use by special review permit with the Weld County Planning Department for an electrical substation that will support the permanent facility equipment. Next slide, please. Following the most recent consultation in June, CDPHE's summary letter to ECMC staff stated, CDPHE notes that Oxy has committed to more BMPs than initially proposed in the Bronco cap. Now I'd like to turn over the conversation to Mr. Joseph Reamer. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Picara. My name is Joseph Reamer, and I am an environmental advisor with KMOG. The locations in the Philly OGDP fall within CPW mapped pronghorn winter concentration area, HPH. The pronghorn herds in this area are at CPW population targets. CPW has been formally consulted both on-site and in meetings 10 times since we began planning activities in 2021. This figure does not include numerous informal consultations, such as phone calls and emails back and forth. Highlights of the consultation include pad consolidation in HPH, a development of a comprehensive wildlife mitigation plan balancing short-term disturbance and long-term environmental benefits. Next slide, please. In exchange for 3 consecutive wildlife timing limitation window relief, KMOG worked with CPW to develop site-specific best management practices to avoid, minimize, and mitigate potential impacts to wildlife. To avoid, minimize, and mitigate potential impacts, KMOG is committing to wildlife-specific best management practices. For operations performed within the timing window, KMOG will install sound walls to provide sound, visual, and access impact minimization to wildlife. Additionally, KMOG will utilize a DJ Basin design, quiet frac fleet, and modified rigs. There are no human triggers in the area, and these BMPs are being implemented solely to protect wildlife. Without highlighting all the BMPs on the slide, I will just note that KMOG has also committed to pay the full winter indirect, the maximum fee CPW can charge, mitigation fee for all of our operations, with knowledge that some pre-production operations will take place outside the timing window. The list on the left side of the slide meets and exceeds the 1200 series rules requirements. KMOG is committed to going beyond the ECMC requirements and being a leader in wildlife resource conservation in Colorado. KMOG has recently demonstrated its commitment to wildlife conservation in Colorado by dedicating 640-acre parcel in high priority habitat into a conservation easement program. Once enrollment is completed, the parcel will remain in perpetuity with direct oversight from our land trust partner. KMOG anticipates finalizing this conservation easement project by the end of 2024. Timing relief allows KMOG to increase their water recycling volumes by 50% on the ranch, allows for development outside the ozone action season, and reduces, if not eliminates, truck trips associated with moving off the ranch a rig and completion crew during the entire Bronco development. This leads to an overall reduction in pre-production operations in big game HPH from an estimated 4.5 years down to just 3 years and 3 timing windows impacted. Because KMOG could operate year-round, we can also avoid significantly increased operations during summer ozone seasons. Rather, we can develop at a constant pace, free of seasonal surges in activity. Next slide, please. This slide highlights the overall time reduction and associated impacts. In the Philly OGDP, we have paths that fall in one big game HPH. The red bars indicate timing windows being observed. Each red bar represents at least 404 additional truck trips to demobilize and mobilize on the ranch. By allowing for efficient development, KMOG is minimizing impacts to wildlife resources. This also allows us to meet the desires of the surface owner for faster, consistent development. It balances our development with the surface owner's ranching operations. As mentioned previously, consistent development reduces the number of ozone seasons impacted by the Bronco development and increases the efficiency of our water recycling program. With that, I will hand it back to Mr. Picara to discuss the water recycling program on the ranch.
Thank you, Mr. Reamer. KMOG will be implementing a water recycling operation sited on the Daniel Boone location, which is part of the Colt OGDP and can treat approximately 10,000 barrels of water per day. Produced water will be piped from locations in the capped lands to the recycling equipment and piped to other locations for completions operations within the capped lands. Using recycled water will reduce the need for fresh water and decrease the amount of water sent to disposal. Once wells are turned over to production, water will flow to the recycling system, then be used for subsequent completions until the last well has been stimulated in the Philly lands. Once the last well has been completed, all produced water thereafter will be piped to disposal, eliminating truck traffic associated with produced water hauling. Next slide, please. The proposed locations are sited along a central corridor in the OGDP near existing disturbance, which includes a road and power line infrastructure. The map on the left shows the proposed development plan and orientation of the wells. The location's centralized position allows for the wells to be drilled to the east and west, which maximizes mineral development while minimizing surface disturbance. The descent fed location will also have wells drilled to the north. The map on the right shows the scenario with alternative locations that are technically feasible to target the same minerals. The alternative plan moves development away from the currently disturbed central corridor. This would result in nearly twice the amount of disturbance with an increased number of well pads along with additional miles of road, pipeline, and utility infrastructure. KMOG believes the proposed plan is the most protective development plan to avoid unnecessary disturbance and fragmentation of HPH. Next slide, please. The proposed locations have been sited cooperatively with the surface owner over the course of many years. This plan is supported by the surface owner and is compatible with the current land use and ranching operations. Any alternative plan is not acceptable to the surface owner. KMOG has also consulted with CPW during the CAP review and most recently in July of this year. We have taken into consideration the request to consolidate where possible. As mentioned earlier, one of the conceptual locations has been eliminated and all of the wells in the north have been consolidated on a single location. Next slide, please. We are committed to plugging 4 wells, decommissioning 1 standalone tank battery, and reclaiming the associated locations within 1 year of these proposed locations being turned over to production. Removing these wells in 5 locations will result in nearly 12 acres being reclaimed, approximately 85 truck trips removed annually, and those associated emissions. These locations to be removed are away from the central corridor. Once reclaimed, these will reestablish natural conditions in HPH and reduce habitat fragmentation. Next slide, please. Listed here are a few of our industry-leading BMPs we are committed to. Our Integrated Operations Center provides remote monitoring and shut-in capabilities 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Our water on-demand system will eliminate trucking of water for completions. Our facilities will have no tanks for produced water or oil, eliminating hauling and associated emissions. Combined water on demand in our tankless facilities will remove over 870,000 truck trips. KMOG has the lowest emissions inventory intensity of any oil and gas operator in the DJ Basin and has already met the 2030 CDPHE Regulation 22 target. As part of our emission reduction strategy, KMOG commits to use a natural gas drilling rig with the battery energy storage system. Next slide, please. The following slide touches on a few more of the BMPs KMOG is committed to. Facilities will be inspected to ensure there are no leaks. Modified drilling rigs use a quiet completion fleet, and sound walls utilized during sensitive times will minimize sound impacts to wildlife. Dust will be controlled with strict speed limits and water applied to the roads as necessary. Water will be recycled and used for completions on locations in the Bronco Cap lands. Next slide. Since 2020, KMOG has taken over 10,000 benzene samples across all phases of operations. All results are well below CDPHE health guidance value of 9 parts per billion for benzene, as shown in the graphs below. Monthly reports will be provided to CDPHE, and a summary will be posted to our stakeholder relations website. Next slide, please. In May of 2022, KMOG held a community meeting for the Bronco Cap. All interested parties were invited to attend. Our stakeholder relations team has a dedicated website operational with current information on Bronco Cap related updates. All required notices have been sent to interested parties for this OGDP and for Weld County's CDP. Next slide, please. In summary, no petitions were filed and no public comments were received. This OGDP is protective of public health, safety, welfare, the environment, and wildlife resources. This OGDP is in a remote part of Weld County with locations 2 or more miles away from RBUs. KMOG has local disposition, with the Weld County CDP being approved in April of 2023 and each of the site-specific WOGLAs being approved. BMPs will be utilized to minimize impacts to wildlife, in addition to providing long-term habitat conservation for short-term disturbance. A comprehensive wildlife mitigation plan for the Bronco Cap has been developed in cooperation with CPW. And consolidation of production facilities minimizes disturbance. Siting locations near existing infrastructure reduces the fragmentation as well, along with retiring older facilities reduces cumulative impacts. Finally, KMOG will commission its largest mobile recycling operation in the DJ Basin, anticipating over 6 million barrels of water recycled and reused for the entire cap if granted relief from timing restrictions. We appreciate your time and consideration of what we feel is an environmentally protective development plan for this area of Colorado. Now I'll turn it over to Ms. Jost to conclude the presentation. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Picara. Just to wrap up, Kerr-McGee believes that the Philly OGDP provides protections of public health, safety, welfare, the environment, and wildlife resources, and is an approvable application. Kerr-McGee respectfully requests that this commission approve the Philly OGDP application, the 4 corresponding joint and spacing unit applications, and the requested relief shown on this final slide. Thank you for the consideration of our testimony today and evidence provided. And I would now request that the slideshow be taken down and we elevate our panel of subject matter experts to join us for any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jost, to you and your panel. As we look to the panel to elevate themselves, we will turn it to commissioners for folks that may have questions for the panel. Commissioner Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and appreciate the presentation, and just had a couple of questions. The first one was about electrification. You discussed potential electrification during the CAP process, and at the time, as I recall the discussion, you stated, as you stated today, that you weren't able to commit at that time to electrification, but that you did commit to making efforts towards pursuing the electrification of drilling operations. And I heard today that you are continuing to pursue those. Can you talk a little bit more about the progress of those efforts since 2022, what you've done and what has been accomplished, and what the potential likelihood is of any of these wells being electrified for the drilling process?
Sure, Commissioner Ackerman. I'll just start out on the Weld County side of things. We had submitted that use by special review permit to the planning department roughly a month ago. So that's in the works, and that's going to be critical to have our substation built, which will support our permanent facilities, and with that operational could also support our drilling rigs. And I would like to hand it over to Mr. Honus, our drilling manager, to provide a little more detail around the conversations with the electric company and where we are.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
Mr. Honus.
I probably need to be sworn in still,
Great.
since I was having technical difficulties.
Yeah, if you just raise your right hand, state your name, and swear to tell the truth.
You bet. Chris Honus, drilling manager for Oxy, and I swear to tell the truth. Chris.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so to answer your question, we have been continuing to make progress to be able to electrify all of the Survey Ranch wells that we have planned over the next couple of years. It's been a slow and fairly complicated process, I guess, is the best way to kind of lead into this. There's multiple companies that we're trying to, utility companies that we're working with to try to get power supplied to the area. Morgan County REA is probably the main one, and then we're also working with Tri-State. We need to build a substation in order to have enough power out there to power the wells once they go on production, or to have the potential to put a rig on highline power. We're so rural that this is by far the most complicated location that we've tried to work through for Highline up to this point. We probably have about a year timeframe looking forward for the possibility of getting the USR in place for that substation. And then we still need to work with these other two utility companies to be able to actually get the lines run, tie into the grid, and get that substation built. So we are working really hard, and we are hopeful that we end up having pads on Highline Power, but being kind of black and white about it, I believe we'll probably start the project trying to use natural gas with a battery and engine management system. And as these things fall into place between the permits and working through with these companies, our goal is to eventually end up with Highline Power for the area. So from a permit standpoint, because of the just so many huge question marks on when all that might fall into place for the Highline, we're proposing sort of what we do on pretty much every pad location, propose natural gas with battery and engine management, which is a very good alternative to Highline, and then continue to work hard to have Highline available as soon as possible out there. But I'm pretty certain that we'll start the initial pads in this application out on the natural gas.
Thank you, Mr. Honus and Mr. Piquera. I appreciate the update there. That was helpful. And just to clarify, at any rate, the commitment is to electrify all facilities, even if you're not able to electrify drill rigs. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. I appreciate the update. I also had a question. This one might be for you, Mr. Reamer, on the conservation easement. And I think we had some significant discussion about this same conservation easement during the Colt OGDP. And just wanted to clarify that we are talking about the same 640 acres as far as the conservation easement is concerned. Is that correct?
That is correct, Commissioner.
Thank you. And my understanding from that discussion was that the conservation easement would be perpetual, and that the only development rights that were reserved would be, actually I'm a little fuzzy on that. Maybe you can remind me. I forgot to take a look at that. Can you remind me on any development rights reserved?
Yes, Commissioner. At this time, there is no intention to preserve any surface rights on that conservation easement, and that conservation easement will be in perpetuity. There's not a term that we are associating with it at this time.
Thanks, Mr. Reamer. And have you finalized that agreement? Is it in place already? And you have a holder for that easement?
We do have a holder identified. We have worked with their board and have a draft agreement. We have not signed anything at this point in time. Actually, today, my coworker is meeting on the parcel and going through the appraisal process, which is kind of that next step in that conservation easement. Again, we hope to have everything signed and approved by the end of 2024, and we're happy to update the ECMC or the commissioners through that Form 4 if they would like some documentation proof that this does in fact happen.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Mr. Reamer, and thank you for making strides towards that. And Mr. Chair, I think I'm grateful for the efforts that have been made, but I do think it would be appropriate to have an update to ECMC staff upon the finalization of the easement, and would propose that as a COA if we move towards approval here. My final question on that, Mr. Reamer, was that my understanding is that this easement then would be associated with this cap, and it's not intended to mitigate wildlife issues outside of the cap. Is that correct?
It's kind of the opposite of that. So again, this is separate from the cap. So this is more highlighting our commitment to conservation here in Colorado. However, the inspiration was for this cap, but it is not offsetting anything from the 1200 series rules. Again, we believe that we are meeting the 1200 series rules with our mitigations that we've proposed, and additionally, the fees that we are paying to CPW.
Thank you. And maybe I misstated or misunderstood, but my understanding is that the benefit of the conservation easement is intended to be applied toward this cap, even though it's the property is outside of the cap. Is that correct?
No, I would not agree with that statement. It's more holistic than that. It's more conservation easement showing our commitment to preserving habitat here in Colorado on a whole. We are not going to use it as a mitigation banking system or anything to offset either the development of this cap or any future development that we have. We aren't doing like an acre for acre trade or anything like that.
Okay, thank you. I think I understand. I do see from the wildlife consultation that this is the component of the project that made it so that CPW was okay with the 3 consecutive timing stipulations periods. Is that your understanding as well?
Again, I think we're in compliance with the rules for the 1200 series with those best management practices and the compensatory mitigation that we had. Again, we're always looking for creative solutions, and one thing brought up through the consultation was indeed the conservation easement. However, again, we have a holistic commitment to wildlife protection here in Colorado, so we view it as tied to all of our operations here in Colorado, not just this cap, as far as what we want to do here in Colorado and how we want to leave it a better place.
Thank you, Mr. Reamer. I appreciate your thoughts there and appreciate your continued efforts on this front.
Other questions to the panel? Commissioner Messner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did want to follow up on that line of questioning around the 640 acre conservation easement. I had read this in your presentation, even as presented in the slides, that was to be utilized as a potential mitigation mechanism for what potential wildlife impacts associated with year-round development in this particular application. I think as I read the CPW consultation, it clearly indicates that there's potential impacts associated with year-round development, but that ultimately the mitigation, as CPW understands it being proposed with the conservation easement, makes them comfortable in being able to approve this. I'm struggling a little bit with statements indicating that this should not be considered a mitigation and is rather just an acknowledgement of something occurring outside of this process. And so I'd like a little more clarity on whether this is actually considered part of this process, a mitigation, or whether your stance is that what's being proposed without that conservation easement meets CPW's expectations for mitigation associated with year-round development.
Thank you for the question, Commissioner. I think I understand it. So I'll try to answer it in several steps here. So the first portion of this is the concept of a conservation easement and us as an operator here in Colorado looking towards those definitely came out of conversations with CPW during this process as we looked at our holdings here in Colorado. So that is true that this was initially discussed in CPW consultation during this specific cap process. However, again, we take a holistic view to our operations here in Colorado. So it's not, again, like a mitigation bake or anything like that. However, we did start this process or want to come up with this idea during this cap consultation process. Again, if you look at the 1200 series rules, we are meeting the expectations by paying the full mitigation fee. And additionally, we're going above and beyond that mitigation fee, which on its own satisfies the 1200 series rules and committing to wildlife specific BMPs. So we believe that we are satisfying the rules and CPW's expectations for protecting wildlife here in Colorado with those BMPs and with that mitigation fee.
Okay, I appreciate your point of view. I'm not sure I agree with you, but I appreciate your point of view.
Further questions for the panel? Seeing none, we move into the deliberation phase. Does any commissioner desire to engage in deliberations? Commissioner Ackerman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I just wanted to recognize the quality of the application here and the work that's been done. This has been a tremendous amount of work. It is indeed a large OGDP, and appreciate the appropriate measures that have been taken on several fronts, especially the water recycling, but on many fronts to plan to leverage the intent of the CAP, which is master planning of developments. I appreciate the reduction of on-the-ground sites and the work that's been done. I know that there's a lot of technical work that goes into that. So again, just wanted to appreciate the efforts that have been done here. I would encourage the operator to continue to work diligently as they are toward electrification, and would love to see some electrification of some of these drill rigs as we have a extended period of drill time going forward here. Thank you for your innovative efforts regarding the conservation easement. I would agree with your presentation in that a conservation easement, as in the materials that I received, is a long-term effort to help mitigate short-term impacts. And I, like Commissioner Messner, did see it as a mitigative strategy associated with this CAP. And I do want to clarify that that is what helps CPW move towards their approval of the project as part of the wildlife mitigation plan and also part of their consultative summary. So I do see it as a mitigative strategy for this CAP, and I do think it's appropriate for this CAP. And I think that the mitigative strategy particularly was applied for the purposes of conducting ongoing operations through 3 winter timing periods in HPH. And like I mentioned, I think that's an appropriate strategy. I feel like, we're working towards long-term conservation, and I do appreciate the operator's efforts towards, again, becoming part of the conservation community and attempting to work towards long-term wildlife conservation, and applaud their efforts on this front. To be clear, I do associate this conservation easement with the disturbances that are taking place in the CAP. And if we have future conversations associated with this same conservation easement and it being applied as a mitigative strategy towards other projects, I would have a lot of questions associated with that. I just want to be clear upfront on that point. That said, Mr. Chair, I do appreciate this OGDP and will be voting in favor of it.
Commissioner Messner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Commissioner Ackerman, for kicking us off. Certainly wanted to let you share your expertise in wildlife as you evaluated this, as to me that seems like the most important potential impact associated with this OGDP submittal. And so appreciate your point of view on that. There's lots that I really appreciate about this application and the work that this operator has done. I'll note that the RBUs are over 2 miles away. There's been significant efforts to consolidate facilities and actually reduce the number of overall wells within the CAP and still be able to access the minerals that they're targeting. There's been a clear local government disposition associated with this, which I think is essential to this particular, to all OGDPs and submittals. I think that the facility retirements that are being contemplated are a positive. 6 million barrels of produced water will be recycled. I really appreciate the efforts that have been undertaken by this operator to develop and implement an on-site water recycling operation. This is not a small endeavor, and I appreciate them continuing to push the envelope as to what is possible with produced water reuse and recycling in the DJ Basin. I think that the infrastructure that was developed as part of this CAP and then therefore applied to this OGDP is exceptional as well, including 3-phase takeaway and produced water pipelines going all the way to the disposal facility, which does eliminate significant amount of truck traffic associated with produced water removal. I also appreciate the commitment to the production equipment being electrified, even in a situation where there is some uncertainty as to the timing associated with that. They've still made the commitment to commit to electrification, and I do appreciate that. I appreciate the development of the wildlife mitigation plans, and my notes indicate, you know, a big appreciation for unique solutions, including the conservation easement to benefit wildlife as a unique mitigation strategy associated with the desire to have year-round operations, including occupations in 3 different timing stipulations associated with high priority habitat. I'm a little, I guess, frustrated with the last comments as part of this when Mr. Reamer is indicating that they feel like the operator feels like they've met the obligations associated with the rules without that conservation easement mitigation. And I would argue that the operator in fact does not, and the 1200 rules specifically indicate that CPW consultation is a critical part of our 1200 series rule evaluations. And CPW has indicated in their consultation the importance of timing stipulations associated with that and the impacts associated with the high priority habitat species. But ultimately, we're comfortable with this unique situation where conservation easement was being contemplated and therefore created offsetting benefit to wildlife that made CPW comfortable with the year-round operations. And so in lieu of that, or if I look at this and the CPW consultation without the inclusion of the 640-acre conservation easement, I'm not sure that, in fact, the operator does meet our rules. But as Commissioner Ackerman indicated, I will look at this, particularly because of some statements made in testimony indicating that this was to be considered as part of this CAP application, a potential mitigation of impacts associated to wildlife and high priority habitat. I will evaluate this application understanding that, and so would be in support of the application.
Further deliberations? Does someone care to make a motion? Commissioner Cross?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will just say quickly, I agree with the comments, especially those from Commissioner Ackerman regarding the wildlife. I do think it's a bit of a unique situation in this instance. And I appreciate all the hard work and best management practices being employed by the operator here to make sure that it does avoid, minimize, and mitigate adverse impacts to public health, safety, welfare, environment, and wildlife resources. And because of that, I will move to approve the application.
Does the movement want to put in the condition of approval mentioned by Commissioner Ackerman?
I apologize, but yes.
Commissioner Ackerman, can you remind the board and everyone your COA?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. A notification upon finalization of the conservation easement upon final signing, a notification to staff. And I believe that maybe Mr. AAG Davenport can help me out, but I don't know if that would be a Form 4 submittal or some other type of vehicle.
AAG Davenport?
I don't think it has to be a Form 4 submittal, Mr. Chair and Commissioner Ackerman. I think pursuant to the terms of the order, if the requirement is just simply to inform staff when the easement has been finalized, that can happen. However, an email notification, whatever works best. It's not a modification to anything, so I don't consider it to be necessary in a Form 4. But if as long as the order contains that requirement, I think that's sufficient for purposes of the motion.
Thanks, AAG Davenport. And so, Mr. Chair, I would restate that written notification to the director, please.
All right, and Commissioner Cross, you're comfortable with that friendly amendment?
And
Yes.
I'll
Commissioner Ackerman?
second as well, Mr. Chair. Sorry to talk over you.
No problem. All right, we have a motion with a condition. We have a second. I am in agreement with my fellow commissioners that this is approvable. I think it was well done. It's consistent with the comprehensive area plan. Appreciate local government weighing in on this. I appreciate the good work on wildlife and the infrastructure. And again, I would echo that noting that movement or construction on this is not contemplated for another year, and then, the following years thereafter. I believe there's ample opportunity for the operator to use best efforts to get to an electrification stage. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Jost, to you and your panel. Thank you to staff for the great work on this application. Commissioners, let's take a morning break of 10 minutes. Let's return at 10:38 or 10:48. And at that time, we'll take up the Karis OGDP. Before we get to the next docket, I need to go back and revisit a docket that I forgot about. That is consent agenda. Did any commissioner have questions on consent? Seeing none, I would move approval of consent.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve consent. Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of consent indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Consent agenda is approved. All right, well, now we'll take up our originally scheduled business, docket 231200375, a oil and gas development plan in Rio Blanco County. Applicant is Karis Piance LLC. It is called the ELUM 12-496 OGDP. I see Ms. Wazelinski. Good to have you with us. I see you've elevated your panelist, and AG Davenport is now ready for the swearing in.
Thank you. We've got 5 witnesses from Karis.
Sorry, I had some trouble unmuting there. Thank you. I will ask each of the witnesses to raise their hand, state their name, and say that they swear to tell the truth. Do my best to make sure I get the right folks. I'll start with Ms. Oda, please.
Allie Oda, I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. Mr. Dennison.
Doug Dennison, I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. Mr. Dismukes.
Jerry Dismukes, I swear to tell the truth.
Mr. Yancey.
Alex Yancey, I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. Ms. Ryder.
Lindsay Ryder, I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. Is that everyone, Ms. Weslinky?
It is. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, the video panel is yours, Ms. Wazelinski.
Thank you, Chair. We'll get our PowerPoint pulled up.
Can we see that or no?
No.
Not yet.
This is always the hardest part. Thanks for your patience. We can see that. If you could just go to slideshow and play from start. Perfect.
There you go.
Okay, well, good morning, commissioners. My name is Kelsey Wazelinski with Jost Energy Law, and with Jamie Jost, we represent Karis Piance LLC in the ELU M12-496 OGDP before you today in docket 2312-00375. We would like to thank Rio Blanco County for its support of the OGDP, ECMC staff, and the director for their efforts on this OGDP. Next slide. In addition to myself, there are 5 representatives from Karis at the hearing today who will be presenting or available for questions after our presentation, and these representatives are listed here. Next slide. I'll take just a few minutes to summarize the ELU M12-496 OGDP and requested relief before I turn it over to Karis. This OGDP requests that the commission establish an approximate 761.6 acre OGDP for the development of 34 new directional wells in the Williams Fork and Ohio Creek formations in Rio Blanco County. The OGDP also requests that the commission approve one Form 2A for the ELU M12496 pad for the development of 34 new directional wells. The entirety of the mineral development area is located within the expanded Liberty Federal Unit. Karis will describe the status of the 34 federal APDs in the presentation today. The proposed ELU M12496 location triggers one Rule 304 ALA criteria. It is within CPW mapped HPH for elk winter concentration area, elk production area, mule deer severe winter range, mule deer winter concentration area, and greater sage grouse priority habitat management area. Because the ELU M12496 well pad had been assessed by the BLM, and because CPW and Karis have an established wildlife mitigation plan and compensatory mitigation plan, Karis received an ALA waiver from CPW for the ELU M12496 location. Karis will describe its consultations with CPW, compensatory mitigation, and committed BMPs to protect these habitats in the presentation today. The OGDP also contains two variance requests. The first is for Rule 406E4 to allow for 28 months instead of 6 months to drill the wells following the setting of conductors. And the second is for Rule 1003B to delay interim reclamation to commence within 28 months of setting the last conductor for the 34 wells. And these variance requests are due to federal and CPW wildlife timing restrictions. And finally, Karis has complied with all notice requirements for the OGDP. No formal petitions were filed and no public comments were received on the Form 2A. I'll now turn it over to Doug Dennison, the Senior Regulatory Manager for Karis, to continue the presentation.
Thank you, Kelsey. Next slide, please, Jerry. Good morning, Commissioners, and thank you for the opportunity to present this OGDP to you this morning. And also thank you to ECMC staff for all of their hard work and assistance getting us to this hearing. The ELU M12496 well pad, which you'll hear us refer to simply as the M12 throughout this presentation, is located in a rural part of Rio Blanco County, about 18 miles north of the town of Parachute and about 24 miles southwest of the town of Meeker. As Kelsey stated, it's located within the expanded Liberty Federal Unit, or the ELU. All of the wells that are proposed for this well pad will be committed to the ELU Federal Unit. We're proposing 34 directional natural gas wells from this well pad. And as you'll hear throughout the rest of our presentation, we've followed the tenets of avoidance, minimization, and mitigation in not only our selection of the location for this well pad, but our development methodology that will be followed. Next slide, please. The M12 will follow the same hub and spoke type development that you've seen from Karis in the past, where we will have what we call a centralized delivery point, or a CDP, that will be used to process all the production from this well pad as well as some other adjacent well pads. That CDP is the ELU G13496, which was previously approved by this commission. Not only will that CDP provide the centralized production point, but it will also be where frac support is staged so that we can reduce the overall footprint of each of the well pads, since we can place a lot of the water handling equipment for fracking on the CDP. But it also allows us to do SIMOPS, where we can complete wells while we're continuing to drill wells, which reduces the overall timing that it would take to develop all the wells on this well pad. Some of the key features is the well pad will be connected to the CDP through flow lines, so there will be no trucking of any materials from the well pad to the CDP. And during the development process, all the water that's used for drilling and completions will also be piped to the well pad to reduce trucking. All the water that is produced during flowback and production will be also piped off, so we will not be trucking water away from the CDP over the long term. And as with all of Caris's operations, we will be using a very large percentage of recycled water for our fracking operations. At this point, we're planning over 95% of the water used for fracking will be recycled water. As I mentioned, this CDP will service several other well pads. There's currently two other well pads that have already been approved by this commission that will also feed into this CDP, and the M12, the one that you're assessing today, will also feed into that production facility. I'll now turn over the presentation to Ali Ota.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Ali Ota, Regulatory Analyst for Caris. Next slide, please, Jerry. I'd like to take a moment to discuss the local, federal, and CPW involvement with this location. The proposed M12 OGDP is located in Rio Blanco County. Rio Blanco does not currently have oil and gas siting regulations, meaning they do not have regulations determining how or where locations are situated. Instead, Caris will secure an oil and gas well pad special use building permit through the county closer to our anticipated construction date. Because this pad develops federal minerals, BLM approval is required before operations commence. As you will see on the upcoming slide, Caris began consultations with the White River Field Office BLM in early 2020. In November 2020, after BLM conducted the NEPA review for the 23.1 short-term and 3.8 long-term acres of this development, a finding of no significant impact was issued. APDs for the 34 wells on this location have been submitted to the BLM for review. Under our expanded Liberty Unit lease obligations, Caris is required to continue drilling in this unit every 18 months. Next slide, please. As previously stated, you can see on this slide the ECMC, BLM, and CPW consultations for the OGDP began in 2020, with the OGDP being submitted in December of 2023. Many hours of meetings, on-sites, and consultations have occurred over the last 4 years. I will now hand the presentation over to Lindsay.
Thank you. Hello, again, my name is Lindsay Ryder, the Director of EHS for Caris. I'm going to cover the wildlife mitigation efforts completed for the M12. Jerry, you can go to the next slide, please. We worked with BLM and CPW to avoid critical resources during the site selection. Barnes Ridge has known active sage-grouse leks, and Caris and its predecessor agreed to avoid developing along Barnes Ridge over a decade ago. Caris continues to avoid that area when selecting locations for development. The M12 is located more than 1 mile away, with natural terrain features separating the location from the lek sites. We plan to construct and reclaim the location between July 15th and December 1st, avoiding the big game winter range and the greater sage-grouse timing limitations established by BLM. I will discuss the specific wildlife BMPs that will be employed at this location to minimize impacts on the following slides. To mitigate potential impacts, we've worked with BLM Sage-Grouse Project Manager, the White River Field Office BLM Wildlife Biologist, and the CPW Biologist to develop an on-the-ground compensatory mitigation project. Next slide, please. We worked with both agencies for almost a year, selecting the habitat improvement area and the scale of the project. The brush removal project commenced in the fall of 2021 to offset the potential direct and indirect impacts from the expanded Liberty Unit development, which includes the M12 and the G13 CDP. Caris agreed to remove 196 acres of overgrown brush and high priority habitat for elk, mule deer, and the greater sage-grouse. Next slide, please. Caris has completed the project, conducting a total of 218 acres of hydrax treatment of mature serviceberry and gamble oak stands to expand existing breeding and brood rearing habitat, which increased native forb composition, increased forage, and reduced corvid perches. This mitigation project was implemented for the full development of the expanded Liberty Unit to provide years of multiple benefits while increasing the connectivity of habitat. The White River BLM environmental assessments completed in 2020 utilized this compensatory mitigation plan as part of the NEPA assessment for the ELU development. As you can see in the photos, in 2021, you're looking at the brush when it was overgrown. In 2022, right after it was completed, and then again in 2024 here just a few weeks ago, where we weren't seeing utilization by sage grouse prior to 2021, we have seen the use now in 2024 with sign from those birds. Next slide, please. We have listed several BMPs for the different phases of this project. I'll note a few of them in each of the categories. For construction and reclamation, as mentioned earlier, Caris will construct and reclaim the location outside of the greater sage grouse and big game winter timing limitations. Caris worked with BLM and CPW to develop an approved seed mix for reclamation. Caris will manage all grazing lease agreements for the North Parachute Ranch under a consistent monitoring program to ensure that livestock utilization does not negatively impact other natural wildlife resources. For development, Caris will only operate during the daylight hours while completing stages 1 and 2 to minimize sound during the night. CIMOPS will be employed on this location, and we will utilize recycled produced water to complete wells, and we will employ continuous air monitoring. For production, we'll use our remote well control and monitoring systems to reduce truck traffic. We will use solar panels as an alternative energy source for on-location production equipment, and we will use bear-proof dumpsters when they are needed. Next slide, please. In our last hearing, there was some discussion around year-round timing limitation exceptions for drilling and completion activity. We want to provide a little more detail on the process and how Caris has managed disturbances to comply with the thresholds that BLM had established. The White River BLM Field Office Resource Management Plan Amendment outlines when exceptions, modifications, or waivers can be applied to seasonal timing limitations. CPW was consulted in the development of the Resource Management Plan Amendment. The RMPA established disturbance thresholds below which year-round development exceptions can be granted. The big game section of the RMPA states that in an effort to encourage clustered development and reduce the extent of seasonal ranges subject to cumulative effects, exceptions to timing limitations would be offered contingent on the development remaining below the following threshold allowances. The greater sage grouse section of the RMPA states, in an effort to encourage cluster development, accommodate year-round well development, and reduce the extent of sage grouse range subject to cumulative effects, exceptions to timing limitations may be offered. Threshold allowances are intended to accommodate directional multi-well drilling technologies that can be managed to dramatically reduce long-term impacts on grouse populations and habitat. Caris has managed the acute and collective disturbance levels in order to legally apply for year-round drilling and completion timing limitation exceptions in accordance with the allowable criteria. The table on the right was pulled from the M12 environmental assessment, and you can see that Caris is well below the established thresholds. Next slide, please. In order to drill and complete the 34 wells on the M12 in the most efficient and timely manner, Caris will be requesting the year-round timing limitation exception for drilling and completion activity. Under the threshold criteria, only drilling and completions can occur within the seasonal restriction when an exception is granted. Construction and reclamation will take place outside of the timing limitations. Exceptions are not requested until closer to the time of activity so that time-specific situations can be addressed. CPW and BLM have historically been in favor of single occupation for drilling and completions. If the exception is granted, Caris will provide the approvals to ECMC through a Form 4, as we've done so in the past. Caris evaluated the development timeframes and determined that it would significantly increase the overall duration of activities if the exception was not offered or granted. The acute disturbance would be extended, delaying interim reclamation 2 additional years. With each rig and completion move, you would see an increase in heavy truck traffic that could result in potential indirect impacts on wildlife. If the exception is granted, there would be 1 occupation versus 3. The graphic on the slide shows the time frame with a granted exception versus no exception, extending interim reclamation out to 2030 versus 2028. The top tier shows the timing limitations in black, which restricts development for 7.5 months, starting December 1 and running through July 15th, leaving only 4.5 months for continuous development. The second tier shows activity with a granted exception. The green depicts construction and reclamation, the yellow depicts drilling, and blue completions. The development timeline would begin in July 2026 and end in the fall of 2028. The third tier shows the timeline if the exception is not available or approved. Construction would begin in 26. Drilling and completion activities would begin in 27 and would stretch over 3 occupations, with interim reclamation being completed in 2030. Next slide, please. We will be requesting 2 variances, as Kelsey mentioned earlier. The first is for Rule 406E4 to allow for additional time to drill the wells following the setting of conductors. The second is for Rule 1003B to delay interim reclamation to commence within 28 months of setting the last conductor of the 34 wells. These variance requests are necessary due to the BLM and CPW wildlife timing restrictions that I just mentioned. Harris proposes bonding in the amount of $213,970 to cover the complete costs of reclamation at this location. Next slide, please. Harris will deploy continuous monitoring on the M12 in compliance with CDPHE's AQCC's Regulation 7, and we will keep those monitors on location for an extended period of time in accordance with our oil and gas methane partnership agreement. Jerry Dismukes, our air compliance manager, is available for further questions should you have them after our presentation. I will now turn the slides over to Alex Yancey. Thank you.
Next slide, please. Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Alex Yancey, Harris's Asset Manager. Thank you for the opportunity to present today. Now, there's often a comparison from West Slope operations to DJ operations, and I wanted to back up for a minute, provide some more details on what we do and why we do it. Fundamentally, it all starts with the geology and the reservoir targets. In the Piceance Basin, the primary target is the Williams Fork Formation, which produces a dry natural gas with very minimal condensate. As you can see in the illustration at the bottom of the slide, the Williams Fork is made of discontinuous and vertically stacked targets. And not to bore you with too much geology, but this is due to how the sands were deposited and the fact that they were more terrestrial and fluvial in nature. You can see how this compares to the evenly blanketed marine deposits that make up the Niobrara, which allows DJ operators to drill wells that are 1, 2, and 3+ miles horizontally through the formation. Now, our geologist hates it when I use this analogy, but I love to use the potato chip model, where if you empty a bag of potato chips into a bowl, you get stacked chips with some touching and overlapping and others that don't. This is why the optimal Piceance development is to drill vertically deviated wells that intersect as many chips as possible. Our acreage is predominantly federal and requires BLM permits in addition to state permits. We try to minimize our surface disturbance by maximizing the number of wells on location. This results in single pad occupations that can last 6 to 12 months. Compared to the Front Range, the Piceance region is sparsely populated, and most of our locations will not have any RVUs within a multiple-mile vicinity. The Piceance Basin, as is the majority of Western Colorado, is high-priority habitat. As such, there's a heavy focus on protecting and accommodating wildlife, such as mule deer, elk, sage grouse, and raptors. Through these accommodations, we are limited to when we can do activities so that we minimize disturbance. Next slide, please. We are asking for a variance on conductors, and I wanted to spend a minute on that to explain in more detail. Under ECMC rules, conductors are considered construction activities, and we typically set them when we were doing pad construction. The picture below shows a recent pad where the conductors have been set and gas lift lines are being installed. As you can see, these activities align well in the initial pad construction disturbance. As we have discussed and shown in the bullets, we must adhere to the build windows, which for areas could be limited to just 3 months out of the year. This picture shows the wells that are being spaced out every 9 feet center to center. This tight spacing allows for a high number of wells on a single location while minimizing the surface disturbance required. Also notice by the time we get to this phase of the process, we are many years and millions of dollars invested into the success of this location. Next slide, please. Finally, I wanted to walk through a hypothetical example of operations for the M12 pad. I've laid out a timeline where we are assuming we drill 34 wells and it takes 2 days per well to set conductors and 9 days per well for drilling operations. For simplicity, the operations start on January 1st, 2025 and completely ignore wildlife timing stipulations. We would finish setting conductors on March 8th, and the following day we would begin drilling operations, which would take us all the way through the year-end 2025. Now, if you do the math from the drill date minus the conductor set date, you'll note that the last 17 wells on the pad would be over their 6-month limit. And this is the most ideal case possible for operations. If you next layer in wildlife restrictions, you could easily have all the wells beyond their 6-month limit. An additional complication is that we often look at these pads in isolation, but the reality is the rig is continuously drilling from pad to pad, and we need to do this similar math across multiple pads. A possible solution to this problem would be to drill fewer wells on a single pad, but that development plan would require more pads, more roads, more mobilizations, more traffic, and overall more disturbance. Alternatively, having the conductor expiration align with the OGDP expiration would allow for increased operational flexibility and would better honor the spirit of the regulation. Thank you. Now I'll hand it back to Ms. Wazelinski to conclude the presentation.
Thank you, Alex. Next slide. So to summarize the ELU M12496 OGDP and request for approval, I'll note the following highlights. The commitments presented by Caris today and the BMPs on the Form 2A protect and minimize adverse impacts to public health, safety, and welfare, the environment, and wildlife resources. The only ALA criteria triggered is for HPH, and Caris has collaborated with CPW and the BLM in developing wildlife protections, compensatory mitigation, and the wildlife mitigation plan. The OGDP minimizes surface disturbance by using the approved G13 CDP pad for remote hydraulic fracturing operations. Caris will utilize existing pipeline infrastructure to avoid new right-of-way disturbance. All gas and produced water will be piped off location to minimize traffic impacts, and Caris will utilize over 95% recycled water for completions. And finally, the requested variances to Rule 406E4 for conductors and Rule 1003B for interim reclamation comply with Rule 502, and Caris agrees to the 4 COAs included in the director recommendation regarding these variance requests. So with that, we respectfully request approval of the OGDP, the associated Form 2A, and the variances to Rule 406E4 and Rule 1003B, and that would include the 4 COAs as stated in the director recommendation. And this does conclude our presentation, so we can take the PowerPoint down, and we've got a team of subject matter experts here for your questions.
Okay, great. Thank you for the presentation on this OGDP. We once again have our panel of experts, and once again, I look to my fellow commissioners to anyone that wants to start with questions, if any. Commissioner Cross?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the presentation. I just have one question. For the expanded Liberty unit, I'm curious where you are in the unit itself. Do you have a lot of wells left to be drilled, or is there still a fair amount of development that needs to occur on the unit?
I can
Mr.
answer that
Yancey?
question now. Alex Yancey, asset manager. The unit's approximately 41,000 acres, and there's about 28,000 that have yet to be developed on here.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions? Seeing no questions, do we want to move to deliberations? Commissioner Ackerman, appreciate your volunteering to initiate deliberations.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and I'm hopping in first a lot today, and we do have some wildlife issues today, so I think it's likely appropriate. And my comments on this OGDP will be brief, but they're brief due to the extensive consultation surrounding this relatively complex wildlife situation, which included a full NEPA process, a wildlife mitigation plan, compensatory mitigation, timing restrictions, habitat work and BMPs negotiated and agreed upon by the operator and CPW and BLM. And I think the consultative process was strong in this application, and I believe this is the type of wildlife consultation process that the commission envisioned pursuant to the mission change rulemaking. We recognize that there are entities out there, specifically CPW and also BLM, that have certainly much more wildlife expertise than we do. And we've relied on them strongly since mission change and this consultative process. We heard a summary today, and it was brief, but it was a year's worth of work on the wildlife front. And I do appreciate and trust the work that's been done between the operators, CPW and BLM in this project. CPW, for its part, recognized that this OGDP is subject to an active CPW CARES wildlife mitigation plan. And they are satisfied that wildlife impact avoidance, minimization, and compensatory mitigation measures have been addressed pursuant to the terms of the mitigation plan and ECMC's 300 and 1200 series regulations. And CPW also noted significant pre-application consultations. I, from my perspective, saw this to be on the heavy end of pre-application consultations associated with wildlife, and that those consultations were helpful in them arriving in the project arriving at a solution that was workable for all consulting parties. CPW also specifically stated that they, pursuant to all of these actions, do not have any unresolved issues or objections. So I just wanted to note the, as we go forward, we continue to talk about OGDPs being approved, and drilling applications were approved prior to mission change, and they continue to be approved post-mission change. And what's not seen or heavily daylighted, at least publicly, is the massive amounts of improved efforts associated with wildlife just as one component of OGDP's post-mission change. I see this as a demonstration of how the mission change rulemaking, and specifically the changes to the 1200 series, added some very concrete protections for wildlife and some concrete mitigation plans that are consistent across HPH categories. As this operator dealt with a number of HPH categories, again, it was a complex situation, and appreciate CPW and BLM and the operator working so diligently to come to a place where this is an approvable application.
Commissioner Cross.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just be brief and build a little bit on what Commissioner Ackerman just indicated. And that is, I think it's important for the public to see a quality application like this and understand that these are not lightly put together. This was a product of more than 4 years of planning with numerous agencies at both the state and federal level. And so a lot of work goes into these applications, and I appreciate all the hard work done on this application. I also believe it's approvable and will be voted in favor.
Commissioner Messner. Oh, sorry, thought I saw you raise your hand. Any further commissioners with deliberative thoughts? Do we have a motion?
I'd move for approval of the application, including the 2 variances and the 4 conditions of approval.
I'll second.
Very good. Motion and a second. Further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Great. Thank you very much for that presentation. The OGDP is approved. We continue to provide thanks to our behind-the-scenes staff that does an admirable job for getting these things prepped over the course of a long period of time so that they can be reviewed and acted upon by commissioners. Commissioners, the next item on our docket is a variance. It is docket 2305-00177, Renegade Oil and Gas Company. And there is a variance request, and there's also an objection to a filing of a local government designee. I believe it is important or a necessary next step before we take up that docket that we move into executive session. I would ask AAG Davenport to visualize himself, but I would move to go into executive session to receive information, legal advice, and analysis as authorized by 24-6402-3A Roman numeral 2 regarding Renegade's variance application and Renegade's objection to public comment. Did I get that right, AAG Davenport?
That was great, Chair.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor of the move to go into executive session signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, for those 48 people that are participating with us, we're going to move into executive session for the reasons as articulated in the motion that was just agreed upon. That means that we're going to leave this Zoom session and we're going to go to a different Zoom session that is for the executive session. It'll be the 5 commissioners and our attorney in that session. We will receive legal advice as mentioned before. We will take no actions. When we're done, we will come back to this open session and then we'll take up the next docket at that point in time. Commissioners, there is an executive session link that is for executive sessions that you should go to at this point in time. If you have questions, you can ask Hearings Manager Puskin about it. Why don't we take 10 minutes and return to that executive session at 11:33, a little bit of a break, and then we'll go into executive session. For the folks listening in, I would anticipate 15 to 30 minutes. It's hard to tell. And then we'll come back here to take up the last docket. I'll go ahead and get us started with some notes. We have returned from executive session regarding receipt of information, legal advice, and analysis regarding Renegade's variance application and Renegade's objection to public comment. We're back in open session on August 14th. It is 12:17. Would recognize Attorney General Kyle Davenport for next steps.
Thank you,
I guess we're
Chair.
still waiting on Commissioner Messner to just FYI.
Yes, when Commissioner Messner joins, we will need a motion to exit executive session that we had for purposes you just named. I would also like to note that in the course of that executive session, no deliberations were had, no decisions were made, and no votes were taken. And with that, Mr. Chair, we just need a motion to exit executive session.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second to exit executive session. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, we are back out of executive session. We're back in our general business meeting again, August 14th, 12:18. We now are going to take up docket 230500177, the variance request by Renegade Oil and Gas Company. Let's go ahead and get Mr. Campbell up. He's the attorney for the applicant. Good afternoon, Mr. Campbell. If you'd like to prepare an entry of appearance for us.
Chairman, this is Mr. Condell. I'm on Mr. Campbell's laptop, second laptop. He should be being invited here in a moment.
Do we need to elevate Mr. Condell or Mr. Campbell as well then? Oh, there he is.
There he is.
Good afternoon, Mr. Campbell. If you'd like to enter your appearance for the record.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Scott Campbell and Rob Willis for the law firm of Post O'Dell and Peterson LLC on behalf of Renegade Oil and Gas Company LLC. And with us today, we have Ed Ingvey, president and owner of Renegade, and J.B. Condell, vice president of land and CFO.
Okay. All right. I think to take this matter up first, we've got the objection that you filed to the public comment that was filed by Adams County. I would note that I'm not sure if it was before or after, but we also have some public comment that was filed by Arapahoe County. And I guess I first would ask, does your objection include an objection to the Arapahoe County comment on the same basis as the Adams County? I'm just giving you that opportunity.
Yes, Mr. Chair, for all the same reasons articulated in our objection that was filed with you.
Okay. And then let me give you a third opportunity for clarification. We had one public commenter sign up. It's Adams County Commissioner Emma Penter. Before I recognize Ms. Penter, I would give you the same opportunity. Does your objection apply to the potential comment of Commissioner Penter?
Yes, Mr. Chair, particularly not knowing what it is she's going to say, and our legal position articulated in the brief that there's a Colorado Court of Appeals case that acts as an absolute bar to consideration and admission of public comment in an adjudicative proceeding. So thank you, but yes, we do object.
Okay. Commissioners, I'm ready to deliberate on the motion without a need for further argument from council. I think the motion speaks for itself. Does anybody feel a need for additional oral argument from council? If not, I'm going to move us directly to deliberation on the motion, and then we'll get to the substance of the case. All right, seeing none, I'll start off. Our rule in AG Davenport, I might make sure I get this right, but our rule 512 allows for public comment in all proceedings, including adjudicatory proceedings, because there's specific mention of if it's a public comment and in an adjudicatory proceeding, let me fumble over that word, then that public comment gets wrapped into the record before the district court. Did I articulate our rule correctly, AG Davenport?
Yes, Chair, you did. It's Rule 512. I just note that Rule 512B provides it would be wrapped into the commission's record for the adjudicatory proceeding.
I'm inclined to follow our rule and allow public comment as we have done historically for all matters, whether they be rulemaking, adjudicatory matters, etc. Despite the fact that there may be a case that I'm not sure is completely on point, but I believe we should follow our rule, and thus I would allow the public comment into the record, including Commissioner Penter's public comment. Whether and to what extent the public comment influences my consideration of the merits of this is yet to be determined by me. But I would generally just sort of follow the rule that we've had in place for any number of years. Other deliberative thoughts from commissioners on this procedural matter? Commissioner Messner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just note I'm in agreement with you, Mr. Chair. And my opinion on that is based on both Rule 512 and the Statement of Basis and Purpose, page 196, 197, which clearly lines out how this agency addresses public comment in adjudicatory hearings.
Further deliberative thoughts from commissioners? I would move that we not approve or deny the motion to strike the public comment, or however it was fashioned. Do we have a second? Motion and a second. Further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. With that, if we could elevate Commissioner Penter, we'll give her 3 minutes for public comment. And then following that, Mr. Campbell will get back into the substance of the matter. Mr. Peskin, if we could elevate Commissioner Penter, I see that she's in the outside area of our Zoom meeting.
Understood, Chair. We're working on it.
Mr. Chair, we're having an issue where the invitations are being declined.
Well, I see Commissioner Pinter has made it to the panel. Commissioner Pinter, can you hear me? It's strange. She doesn't appear to be muted. She's not visualized. Again, Commissioner Pinter, are you able to hear us? Oh, now she's gone. %99 of the time, Zoom is a favorable format for all of this. This is that 1%. Give another minute or two, and then we'll move to the substance and perhaps hear from Commissioner Pinter at a time when she's available.
Chair, if I have additional information, I will relay it to you when there's a break.
All right, then let's move to Mr. Campbell. I believe it's time for your case in chief. At some point, I need to swear in the witnesses. Do you want me to do that before you get started, or do you want to do an opening presentation, then swearing in? What's your preference?
Yeah, I think it's easier, Mr. Chair, if we just swear in our witnesses up front. We have Ed Ingvey and JB Condell as witnesses here today.
Great. AG Davenport?
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Ingvey, Mr. Conville, I believe you've been through this before. Raise your hand, state your name, and you swear to tell the truth, please. Mr. Ingvey.
Ed Ingvey, I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. Mr. Condell.
My name's JB Condell. I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Campbell, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, commissioners, and staff. Thank you for hearing this matter today. I'll forego the introductions. Renegade has submitted an application for a variance from the combusting limitations, not venting, combusting, under Rule 903D3 of the Commission's rules for just 11 stranded wells with low gas oil ratios, all located within a 900 square mile area covering parts of remote Adams, Arapahoe, and Elbert counties. Counties. Metering of gas at the combustors shows field-wide unused gas production is de minimis. The ask of Renegade today is that the Commission approve the variance authorizing combustion of unused gas consistent with the Director's recommendations. With that introduction, a brief introduction, and your permission, Mr. Chair, we're ready to call our first witnesses.
All right, I see that we've got Commissioner Pinter now. Let's give her 3 minutes, and then that way you'll be able to weave into your response, any response that you've got. Commissioner Pinter, you're recognized for 3 minutes to provide your comment.
Thank you so much, and I apologize for the technical error. I was listening just fine as a guest, and then when I got elevated to panelist, there were technical issues. And I also apologize for being in my car. I know the timing was a little awkward today, and so I had to step out of a meeting to join you all. So thank you for accommodating my late joining. I just want to reference the written comments that were previously submitted by our staff. We do have concerns about this operator's apparent inability to operate in a protective and compliant manner. We know that there are patents issued by CBP approval and operating cryptocurrency absent local approvals, both in our organization as well as across the jurisdictional lines in Arapahoe. We also have deep concerns that the insufficient financial insurance in place with ECMC for their wells. There's only $3,300 per well in bonding when we know that remediation is almost always in the 6 figures for wells of this type. So we have a lot of concerns both about their current operation, their fidelity to regulations when they have it, as well as their ability to remediate given the low level of bonding. We also know that Renegade is one of the larger contributors in Adams County. It's the 4th largest operator with over 80 active wells. And this variance allows to be vented 11 producing wells in ADCO, which is 28 total for at least 2 years. And a similar request was denied by this body, ECMC, in 2023 partially because the applicant did not demonstrate good faith effort to comply and failed to come into compliance during the period. And the same is true of this application. You have a lot of details in front of you, and I know you're going to hear from the applicant as well as have deliberations yourselves. We're asking that this particular variance be denied. Thank you for your time and consideration.
All right, thank you for the comment. We appreciate it. Okay, we're back to the applicant who provided its opening statement, and now it's calling its first witness. Mr. Campbell, the floor again is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just briefly, we reincorporate our objections on the public comment. We respectfully submit that everything Adams County Commissioner Emma Pinter stated was previously stated in the Adams County LGD's written comments, each of which has been legally and factually rebutted. So we understand your ruling here today, but I just wanted to reiterate our objection and note that I don't believe we heard anything new in her public comment. So with that said, and again, with your permission, Mr. Chair, we're ready to call our witnesses. And I think we're going to start with Mr. Ingby. And at some point during the presentation, he will hand off to Mr. Condell.
Very good. Objection noted for the record. Go ahead and call Mr. Ingby.
Mr. Ingby.
Okay. Put you off. Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in front of you guys here today. I am going to kind of be guiding through the packet that you've probably already received and have gone through. The first slide after the title slide is a little bit unusual. We got a clarification right off the bat, but that was to clarify our previous submittal from 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, whenever it was. Came to our attention that there might have been some confusion with regard to the amount of combustors and the amount of gas. There is one combustor that we are applying for here that has all the CDPHE permits in place already, but it is an active third-party crypto site. And we are requesting, though, this particular site also be part of our variance application. I am getting a little worried that our third party is possibly looking to pull out, and I think we might need a little transition time for us to fill their shoes. So I'll discuss that more here later in the presentation. The first slide that you're looking at there, or the map that you're looking at, is this is once again is all brought about as a casualty of Third Creek Gathering System out there, which encompassed a very, very large footprint, 40 plus miles by 35 miles. There was 900 miles of pipe. There was well over 500 wells connected to this system, mine being a significant chunk of those. And I'd also like to point out that this is also ECMC's highest area of concentration of orphaned wells in the state. The history here, where Renegade, as you all know, came to this commission with our first variance application February of last year. That was actually filed in February of 2022 to basically achieve the same scenario, but on more numerous amount of leases. Renegade's first variance application was heard. The variance was denied. But we certainly felt that during that denial process that the commission recognized through its process, through the deliberative process, that Renegade could resubmit stuff, a cleaned up application, and that is what we did. So we are kind of basing this on the encouragement, I think, of that process or that denial. When you look at the first variance hearing, Renegade presented a narrative of what impacted our operations, specifically the Third Creek situation out there, which was shut down in May 31st of 2018, and then through that point in time. Oxy Anadarko shut down the Third Creek Gathering System. The action impacted hundreds of legacy predominantly vertical oil and gas wells, stranding these wells and ending their reasonable ability to produce with no access to gas market. And once again, I want to emphasize that this is over a very, very large footprint. This isn't something that could be easily replaced. We proceeded to investigate all avenues that we could even think of to try to come up with some way to at least keep some of these wells producing, what we were going to do as a result, to try to lessen the impacts that were caused by the shutdown of Third Creek, and among those things, Renegade had to absorb some staff cuts. We tremendously reduced cuts. We acquired combustors, which were allowed and appropriate at the time at a pretty significant expense to Renegade for our lower producing GOR wells. We did shut in our high GOR wells. We were trying to engage Anadarko to see if we could either get them to sell or potentially buy Third Creek or part of Third Creek. And we began permitting the combustors with CDPHE. And we started looking to see what else we could do out there from a beneficial use standpoint, which included on-site electrical generation, gas to liquids technology, and the on-site data center operation, or the crypto mining, kind of in short. They're all different too. The system is so expansive. The leases are different in different areas, that there is not a one-size-fits-all solution out there. Things that we did learn from the previous hearing, at least that's the takeaways that we thought after listening to it on several different occasions, and the deliberative process that you guys had after our presentation last time. It seemed like the part that kind of rubbed the commission wrong, kind of wrong at that point in time, kind of broke down into two main areas. One of which was that we only had part of our combustors that we were looking to permit, which I believe was 22 sites. Were only part of those were in process with CDPHE. Not all of them were. We were kind of slow walking them a little bit because we didn't want to spend the significant amount of money to get CDPHE permits for something that we weren't sure was even going to be approved by you. So what we've done on this one is we have only requesting the ones where we have active CDPHE permits for. The other thing that seemed to be, that you guys had a little consternation with, was the fact that you didn't think the gas capture plans and things were specific enough, and we're looking for additional beneficial use descriptions on some of the casing head gas for each location. There again, they're not all going to be the same. So what did we do? Post-hearing or post-denial is we shut down all the combustors. We shut in all the wells that produced basically all the gas that was out there. We did continue to produce a couple wells here and there by shutting in either the casings of the wells so that no associated gas would be produced with the little bit of oil that we were making. There were some leases that had multiple wells on them. Some wells made gas on the leases, some didn't. There was a lease or two, I believe, that we retained and left producing the wells that made no gas, but we shut in all the wells that did make gas. And we expeditedly tried to file for, at the encouragement of the commission, for this second variance, which was done and submitted on May 10th of 2023. And in the interim, we have been sitting around now waiting for well over a year to get our second variance application heard. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over a little bit to JB for some economic aspects.
To review, this request is a 502C variance from 903D3 and 5 to permit combusting from certain wells in Adams, Arapahoe, and Elbert counties. We've been unable to implement the plans that we detailed in our application and that we will discuss in a moment since the last hearing, due to limits on our available cash flow caused by the shutdown of 70 of our wells due to the Third Creek shutdown. An approved variance today will allow Renegade to produce a minimum of 35 additional barrels of oil per day from shut-in wells. And this increased cash flow will provide the funds necessary to implement the plans that we have detailed in our application and we will talk about, designed to render the 11 combustors unnecessary. 35 barrels a day, today's economics, deducting royalties and lease operating expenses could generate as much as $40,000 per month for Renegade to use to implement the plans. Those implementation will involve engaging consultants, applications for county permits, rights of way acquisition of equipment for beneficial use on locations, and pipeline materials and the actual construction for the wells that we are pursuing gas sales with that will be discussed here momentarily. Again, this variance application was reduced from 22 combustors down to the current 11, and from 47 wells feeding those combustors down to 28 wells. All 11 combustors in this application are fully permitted with CDPHE. All are in place on site and ready to activate with an approval. And as Mr. Ingby stated in the map shows, the combustors are many, many miles apart throughout Adams, Arapahoe, and Elbert counties. This slide shows the individual wells and leases, the combustors at each, the number of wells at each, and our CDPHE permit and heirs ID numbers. Mr. Ingby will now discuss the gas capture plans in more specificity.
Okay, can you hear me now or not? Yeah, okay. We're playing, showing that we don't walk in each other and give you a bunch of feedback. The following, and I don't know if it's too much minutia or not on a lease by lease basis, but I'm happy to go through it. The following are, specifically identified uses that we are targeting for each one of these leases. And knock on wood, and that's what the goal is we would like to take the combustor out of service once we come up with the alternative use. I can maybe I'll summarize it. Try to summarize a little bit, but for instance, combustor 1 is a lease in Arapahoe County on the in the Lowry bombing range area. We are currently negotiating with Tenderfoot Gas Pipeline, which is GMT's newly constructed infrastructure out there. And we have a agreement in principle and are hopeful that an expansion that they are doing for servicing some of their other wells and development will allow those to be brought back on. Those on pipeline, excuse me. Combustor 2 is a little bit more remotely and more of a challenging location. There is, it doesn't make much gas either. We have started to use in places abandoned Third Creek infrastructure and trying to negotiate and see whether that is plausible out here to maybe aggregate several of the nearby wells. And this particular area seems like it might be ripe for a data center crypto mining operation. We have looked at electrical generation there too, but the economics just don't cut it. Combustor number 3, the Ferguson 25, that's one up in Adams County. It's a multi-well lease, 7 wells. That one also seems to be ripe for a data center crypto mining operation. You may or may not be aware, but the Adams County process to implement rules for crypto mining, I think, took upwards of 2 years. And we had been working with them and trying to advance them or push them along on developing that concept. What they came out with could be a little challenging, but we believe that there is a possibility there that the crypto operation will solve that particular one. There's not even an outside chance that we can get this back connected through some of the old Third Creek infrastructure to another tie-in up there too. Combustor 4 is kind of just north of DIA. It is very close to the current and still operating Anadarko, Oxy, or Western Gas infrastructure that is currently being used. In fact, it's right across the street. We have been doing everything we can think of to try to get them to help tie in some of these stranded assets of ours. In general, they have not shown much affinity for us, but we are still trying to push ahead and see if we can't get those tied back into what's referred to as the Wattenberg gas gathering system, which up in the DIA area and kind of Western Adams County area has a lot of parallels to it with the old Third Creek system. The number 5 is the Whitehead 411 down in Elbert County. It doesn't have much gas. It's not a bad little oil well. That one I've got numerous adjacent offset shut-in wells too. So we are also looking at this one as a possibility for aggregating using abandoned infrastructure to possibly aggregate enough volumes to centrally locate a crypto mining operation also at this point in time. Combustor 6 is the one that we were getting clarity on. That is one in Arapahoe County that is being utilized right now, or that lease is being produced. All the gas on that lease is being utilized in a current third-party crypto operation. But like I said, we do have some concerns that that party is getting a little bit exasperated with some of the Colorado operations and are talking about moving their things to Venezuela. Number 7 is another Adams County lease east of DIA. There again, that one is on top of the Wattenberg gathering system that Anadarko and Oxy operate. And it would be really nice if we could finally get some sort of cooperation, some sort of dialogue even with Western Gas to add this. This is not unique in the area also. There's probably 40 other wells of higher GOR nature in the vicinity that are basically sitting on top of or very adjacent to the Wattenberg gas gathering system, which is currently active in the area. So that's this is not just for these specific sites. We're trying to open a dialogue with them for numerous sites. The combustor number 8 is there again. It's kind of a fairly remotely located one. Same story with it. We think we can maybe combine it with some other shut-in production in the area and possibly use it for a crypto operation. But there again, it's a lower GOR well, so there's not a whole lot of gas there. Wouldn't necessarily support an install on that lease alone. Combustor 9, 10, and 11. These are leases out on the Lowry range again that were recently within the Civitas cap filing. There is existing infrastructure located in the vicinity. It would require us to build to a certain extent. We were kind of waiting to see what Civitas's caps plans were, but we definitely have a dialogue with Civitas out there, and we have an agreement to hook this together once they have final determination on infrastructure development, and hopefully the facilitation of that Lowry cap approval will make that happen. So that's kind of a rundown of the individual gas capture plans on these 11 particular leases. I'd be happy to expand on that if there are questions. And the next part of our presentation has more to do with the legal side of things. And I'm going to turn this over to Scott, albeit I think we've discussed this on numerous occasions before with the commission. And I don't know if there's any elaboration that's necessary here or not, but let him go into that.
Thank you, Mr. Ingby. It's really a closing statement, I think, here. Taking a look at slide number 18, good faith attempts here to comply with the commission rules. We submit that Renegade has and continues to make good faith efforts to comply with Rule 903. And it's demonstrated by the testimony and some of the exhibits that have been submitted to you, Renegade believes those efforts are getting traction. They're making progress. The wells associated with 4 of the 11 sites are close to being connected to gathering systems with agreements reached in principle. For 2 of the other wells, Renegade continues, as Mr. Ingby noted, to lobby Western Gas for connections, lobby the counties for a data center. It will be moving through the respective counties' processes, such as they are, for obtaining that approval. And it has been investigating utilizing abandoned gathering lines to aggregate volumes with nearby wells to a central location, ideally also for a data center, but there may be some opportunities to connect to local gathering systems there as well. At the moment, there are no other identified alternate beneficial uses for the unused gas, but technology does change and innovation could give rise to that beneficial use or uses in the future. As to elements 2 and 4 for a variance, we submit that based on other variances approved by the commission, that conceptually the combustion variances don't violate the basic intent of the act and don't result in net adverse impacts. You've heard testimony on undue hardship. So in closing, Renegade's also raised a number of other legal issues, which we know you've read a number of times now, in which the director's recommendation has rejected for reasons previously articulated or adopted, but stated in the present recommendation. So with that said, for the record, and before we close the record and submit this matter to you, we're here to address any legal or factual questions you may have before you move to deliberations. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you very much. The panel is open for questions from commissioners. Commissioner Cross.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your presentation today. I do want to ask a couple clarifying questions here. First, Mr. Ingby, you did talk about some of the ongoing production, and what I want to clarify is, are you currently operating the 11 wells for which you are seeking a variance on today?
Yes, that goes to me, right? Okay. There are, let me look at the number.
Yeah.
Some yes and no. I think there might be 3 leases that have the combustion permits filed for that we are currently operating. I might have that wrong, but we are not producing any gas, or the wells that produce the gas on those particular leases have been shut down.
Is there any gas, de minimis or not, that is currently coming out of those wells?
Generally not, no. We're burning them in the treater. We're using them on engines, and oftentimes we're having to supplement with propane.
So you are burning them in the treaters?
Excuse me?
You said you are burning them in the treaters?
Whatever gas is there is being utilized on the on-site equipment. In addition to propane, oftentimes are being augmented for that on-site equipment.
So one of the things,
combusting.
one of the things that I want to touch on is you do have a compliance order, or sorry, it's a compliance order on consent with CDPHE, correct?
Yes.
And under that, the basis of that was that you did not have the necessary permits for several separate low pressure separators and heater treaters, correct?
You mean the basis for the settlement that we reached with them?
Yes.
Yeah, there was a period that we had filed the permits, but we had not yet received them. And we were combusting under the assumption that that could be done, and it was not, and that's where the settlement was largely derived out of.
So pursuant to that settlement, do you have the authority to currently run those separators and heater treaters?
Correct, yes.
And so those are being operated currently?
No. We are operating no combustion right now, and we are awaiting this variance from this commission.
Okay, so everything that's tied to that COC is currently waiting for the potential approval of this requested variance.
Yes.
Okay. And the other question that I have is, do you have any outstanding violations with the ECMC? Notice of alleged violation.
I mean, there's
or enforcement action.
There's no enforcement actions. I'm sure there's a field inspection that probably hasn't been, you know, a corrective action affiliated with a field inspection or something of that nature. But outside of that, there's nothing active with ECMC as far as any sort of enforcement actions.
Okay. What about with local governments such as Adams County?
No.
And one of the things that I wanted to ask about, we did see in the comments from Adams County that there was unpaid fines. Could you explain the situation involving that?
Those would not be they are not unpaid fines, but those are actually a dispute that we're having them with regard to inspection fee assessments. And we've put them on notice, and it's traversing through some legal aspects. They have not sued us for anything. We contend that the inspection fees that they are assessing for routine inspections, where there's no specific Adams County regulatory aspect, is no different than a ECMC inspection, and therefore does not merit an inspection fee. We believe we're reading Senate Bill 181 properly when it comes to that.
Okay. And
Commissioner Cross, if I can interrupt real quickly, our legal arguments and factual bases for those arguments are laid out in detail in the objection to the Adams County LGD public comment that we provided you. So
I appreciate that. And I certainly don't want to get into the legal justification on those arguments today. I just want to try and get a big picture of your feelings on those arguments. And then lastly, I just want to try and get an idea. You mentioned several different tie-ins, including, I believe you said, the Tenderfoot gathering system. And you said there is an agreement in principle, but not ready to tie in today. What remains to be able to tie in? I believe it was at least with respect to combustor number 1.
Well, some of this agreement actually has just been transpired over the last couple months, but they are building more infrastructure, developing new pads in the vicinity. We are trying to decide now whether it makes sense to try to wait for those pad developments to happen before we drop in and add our wells, or whether it makes sense to, you know, permit a line that basically might become obsolete by the time we get the permit. So, you know, we're kind of weighing our options as we have entered and negotiated a deal with them. They will likely be doing additional development in the near area surrounding most of those leases, or at least several of those leases down there. The Tenderfoot one, the Civitas one, which is kind of more the western side of the Lowry Ranch or Lowry Range down there. Those development plans by Civitas have kind of been a little bit in flux, as you probably recognize, and some of the heat that has come down on the CAP application. So they're trying to finalize where those pads are going to be and what their infrastructure is going to look like.
So with respect to the Tenderfoot, you're considering on your own doing your own line that would go up and connect, but you're kind of waiting to see if it's going to be obsolete in the meantime.
Correct. And we're working with GMT on that, and GMT is kind of guiding some of that process. But there again, this is a relatively new deal. that we have entered into with GMT. It involves some other stuff that are outside of this variance application. So, and they're trying to make sure that, you know, they have enough capacity within their tenderfoot pipeline, and make sure that contractually they're not at odds with some of their gathering agreements and things of that nature to handle third-party gas.
I think those are my only questions for now. Thank you.
Other questions from commissioners to the panel? Commissioner Oath?
Thank you. So I want to spend a little time trying to better understand your argument for the variance requirement in 502A that the requested variance will not violate the basic intent of the act. I've read your middle and you very quickly went over it here, and it is not clear to me what your argument is for that, for how you meet that part of the regulatory requirements.
You want to field that, or you want me to, or how do you want to do that?
Talk about the facts.
Okay. So you're referring specifically then to 502A? And
the specifically number two of the 5-part test, yes, that the requested variance will not violate the basic intent of the act.
Like I said, I think it's the intent of the act. I guess I would. Okay.
Thank you for your question. It is our contention that it's consistent with the intent of the act, because it is our view that the act does in fact permit the flaring of gas, provided the flaring is not unreasonable. And that is a statutory construction argument that we've laid out again in detail in our filings with the commission. So it's our contention that contrary to the commission's position, that flaring gas in order to produce oil is not per se waste under the language of the act. And we would also note, just as a practical matter, that a number of other flaring combustion variances have been granted by this commission. So at least at a high level, the concept of combusting, provided the other elements of a variance are approved, have already been determined by this commission to be consistent with the act.
Okay. Appreciate that. And I know you referenced the D90 facility in North Park with respect to the last piece of what you just indicated there. Can you provide any information about volumes for comparison or context?
I can't. It's much larger, I believe, for D90.
Yeah, if I may, D90 in Jackson County, the production reports that I looked at recently, they are combusting hundreds, if not thousands, of MCF per day, and this application is for between 45 to 60 MCFs per day.
How much Wilford was?
Sorry.
Thank you. Sorry, did you have additional information you wanted to provide?
This application is consistent with the Williford volumes, and there was a second approval. Wellington. These are the de minimis. These are consistent with the de minimis volumes of other approved applications, and an order of magnitude less than the D90 and Jackson County.
Yeah, thank you. In terms of the each of the wells that you walked through, can you tell me, so for the second one, Rhine Tank Battery, which county that is located in? And I'll have that question for most of these.
The Rhine Tank Battery is in Arapahoe County.
Okay. And so your presentation and materials have indicated that your gas capture plan is based on development of crypto mining operations at this site. Can you provide us some information and confidence for why you believe that will be approved in Arapahoe County?
Well, there's a fair significant history there too. We have talked to Arapahoe County. It seems like they have kind of maybe changed their position somewhat on the legality of crypto mining or not, but there is a process within the county that could allow for a non-conforming use, and we need to flush that out and explore that and see if that is something that we can apply for. We can always apply for a variance, we know that. Part of our problem, at least on that specific lease though, is I think those volumes are going to need to be aggregated with other volumes. So as the actual siting of the equipment, until we get some sort of confidence that we can move forward, and I don't know if this would be the first one that I would advance, you know, before we can even file a RIPE application. It's going to take a little bit more legwork and see if there's other gas on nearby shut-in wells that could be aggregated with that Rhine.
Okay.
And Commissioner, if I may, this is Scott Campbell. I think your question also underscores a fundamental problem we have with the public comment process. Arapahoe County filed its public comment yesterday afternoon or late yesterday morning, not sure which now. Of course, there's statements in there that crypto mining data centers are quote unquote prohibited in agricultural areas, but we don't agree. We think there is a reading of their provisions that potentially allows us to acquire approval. But unfortunately, we don't have any cites to any of their zoning regulations, nothing that we were afforded an opportunity to vet or read or verify before appearing before you here today. So, and we have not laid out our entire legal position on why it is Arapahoe County could or might permit a data center in this particular area. And we also submit for the reasons that we explained in our objection to the Adams County LGD that the commission should let Arapahoe County and Adams County do their thing. Renegade has testified that it's ready to jump through their hoops, and it will have to deal with the answers that it gets from them. But we don't believe the commission is the appropriate place to be deciding whether or not Renegade is likely or unlikely to get those particular approvals. And in particular, for example, Adams County. Adams County has said that any application that is not, well, sorry, I'm thinking about a different issue. Thank you. That's all I've got on that particular position.
Okay. Thank you for that. And I'm not intending to get into a debate with you here, and appreciate your position on the public comments. I think where I'm coming from is notwithstanding that, as the applicant, you all have the burden here, burden of proof. And to me, a piece of that is demonstrating to us that you have a viable path forward with these gas capture plans in the 2-year variance period that you have proposed. And so I am trying to understand what you can provide to us that should give us confidence that that is the case. So in general, can you, so in the next two, the Ferguson 20 P tank battery. I think for both of those, it appears that one of the potential paths forward that you presented was the Wattenberg gathering station, but in your testimony even indicated that Anadarko does not seem very interested in this. So with that, as well as kind of where you are in conversations with Adams County, do you have any additional information that you would point me to that would give me confidence that you have a viable path forward there?
Maybe not to your satisfaction, but yes, we do believe that we will be at some point sitting down with Western Gas and exploring this. One of the options that we're looking at, and I believe it's for one of these leases here, is we have a meter on another lease that is currently connected to Wattenberg. And we believe that with possibly utilizing abandoned infrastructure, we can just pass gas through that meter's lease and deliver it to Western Gas. So from that standpoint, I guess it might not require Western Gas's approval. If we are just currently utilizing an existing gas receipt point. The problem up to this point in time has been more the infrastructure. I mean, these type of wells and the production volumes that we're looking at cannot be saddled by significant infrastructure investment. So we are trying to figure out if there is a way that we can do this in a relatively inexpensive way to try to aggregate gas behind maybe an existing meter and deliver it that way. Our preference would be to put it straight on Wattenberg, but we do need cooperation with Anadarko or Western Gas for that to happen. We've solicited that type of cooperation. We've looked for help from all sorts of regulatory agencies, including the ECMC in the past, and generally it has not caught much inspiration. When Third Creek got shut down, part of what Renegade did is we did file lawsuits against some of the parties there. We also petitioned the PUC to designate that Anadarko out there was acting as a monopoly gatherer. We kind of got tripped up on some formality type stuff. The PUC said the ECMC decision, and ECMC said go to the PUC. So we kind of got stuck on that one. Nobody wanted to commit to say that, you know, they were a monopolistic gatherer in the vicinity, or characterize them as such to where they would have to take the gas. So I think that, coupled with maybe some of the lawsuit stuff that was going on at the same time, has probably diminished Western Gas's appetite to show much cooperation with Renegade. And like I said, and I think we are we're the last party standing out there, as you'll note, and as I noted. This is by far the heaviest concentration of ECMC orphaned wells. Most of the adjacent producers, any producers in the area, have just thrown up their hands and they've just turned over their wells back to the commission or back to the state of Colorado for plugging. So we are trying to do whatever we can to put ourselves in the same position, but you know, I would welcome any cooperation that anybody wants to interject themselves in and maybe prod the owners of the Wattenberg system along a little bit to tell them, hey, we you know, can you help these guys so that we don't have more orphaned wells showing up on our docket.
So my last piece is really a point of clarification. So again, going back to the criteria required for approval of a variance, the fifth component is that the requested variance contains reasonable conditions of approval or other mitigation measures. Are there any conditions of approval or other mitigation measures that you all are proposing, other than that this is a variance for a term of 2 years?
Thank you, Commissioner Oath. Other than the 2 years, no. Renegade is proceeding on the basis of the commission director's recommendation, which beyond the 2-year approval, our 2-year term limit, did not request or recommend any other conditions of approval.
Okay, thanks.
Other commissioners with questions? All right, seeing no further questions, we turn to deliberations. Commissioners, does Commissioner Cross?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll just say I do have quite a bit to say here. After the passage of Senate Bill 19-181, this commission underwent emission change rulemaking to meet its statutory mandate to regulate oil and gas in a manner that is protective to public health, safety, welfare, environment, and wildlife resources, as well as its mandate to prevent waste. As part of its efforts, the commission prohibited the venting and flaring of natural gas at completed wells except for certain enumerated exceptions and allowed for variances. To allow operators to address this change, time was allowed to find beneficial uses to file a gas capture plan. Although the time frame to resolve these issues has long since passed, we have seen several instances of operators seeking variances. I don't want to speak for the other commissioners, but I have found the delay in compliance frustrating. I do recognize that some of these operators face extreme circumstances, such as closed pipelines being located many miles away and sometimes in different states, leading to extreme cost to connect gathering lines. However, these variances that we have approved to date have been limited in scope and have come from operators who have demonstrated efforts to use the gas in other ways. Some of those proposed uses have been extreme: hydroponic greenhouses or freezing gas for transport. Some have been delayed because of delayed bureaucratic delays, such as working with electric cooperatives to see the change in the sources of energy or ratios of energy that they receive. But those efforts have not been adequately demonstrated here. Importantly, Renegade sought a variance for the same issue 2 years ago, and in February of last year, it was unanimously denied by this commission. At that time, Renegade blamed others for its need to flare, noting that a 40-plus-year-old gathering system was shut down. To demonstrate good faith efforts to comply, Renegade previously noted that its owners mortgaged their house and tried to force the gathering system to reopen. The commissioners did not find those efforts demonstrated the requisite good faith. Moreover, Renegade had not submitted applications for air pollutant emission notices before seeking the variance and continued to operate as business as usual while venting and flaring, rather than shutting in wells. Notably, Renegade now alleges that the prior variance was denied for failure to obtain permits ahead of time and failure to submit specific gas capture plans, ignoring the lack of good faith efforts described above. Unfortunately, I do not believe anything has materially changed today that would alter my prior decision, points which I will discuss later. At bottom, they aren't hammering out any of the details. They are seeking time to assess potential options. Indeed, Mr. Ingve said that they still need to flesh out the possibilities of some uses and are in no position to file applications for some of the potential permits that would ultimately be required for their proposed gas capture plans. Before addressing their legal arguments and specifics of the application, I do want to highlight several critical points. First, Renegade has essentially set forth an ultimatum to this commission. Approving the variance will allow Renegade to be a viable operator and pursue solutions, but denial will possibly orphan wells. While I understand the gravity of the situation and appreciate the financial strain this operator faces, I do not appreciate an operator framing an argument as approve my request or the state will suffer. Our rules are established to protect public health, safety, welfare, the environment, and wildlife resources. We should not be encouraged to bend those rules to benefit a single operator to prevent a negative impact to the state. That is not to say that I want to orphan wells. Indeed, that is why we have been strict on our financial assurance rules and plans. I should note, Renegade has submitted an option 5 plan, while also admitting that it has no asset retirement plan and cannot certify its financial capability to fulfill its obligations, a basic tenet of an option 5 plan. It also explains that it has exceptional circumstances because of the shutdown of the Third Creek gathering system, again putting the putting the onus on other people, and proposes not to provide financial assurance for wells that were connected to the Third Creek gathering system. This is simply not sufficient. Similarly, Renegade tries to sway the commission by highlighting the importance of oil and gas on the economy. While I recognize the contribution oil and gas makes to local, state, and national economy in taxes, jobs, and technological advancement, as well as many products that utilize oil and gas, that again is not a reason to bend our rules to the detriment of public health and safety. Also, contrary to Renegade's application, shutting in a small number of wells will not remove the entire hydrocarbon stream from this commodity market, resulting in an increase in prices to the detriment of the public's welfare. The vast majority of operators in the state have found a way to adhere to our regulations, so the effect on public markets is unlikely to be influenced by this operator shutting in a small number of wells. Also along that point, Renegade submitted several letters from royalty owners and noted that shutting in wells deprives them of royalty payments, will have future impacts due to the time value of money, and is wasteful. It isn't the commission that may cause these wells to be shut in. If Renegade had operated in a prudent, responsible manner and continued to adhere to ECMC rules, royalty payments would not be in jeopardy. I think it's also important to note the history of noncompliance. As discussed today, CDPHE had issued several violations, and there was a compliance order on consent for operating separators without permits. There was also the discussion of ongoing disputes with Adams County related to fees. I'm not going to go into the specifics of that or whether they're correct or anything else, but I do think it's important to note. Renegade also seems to raise the takings argument that they previously raised, though in a more muted fashion than the previous application. While I understand that oil and gas rights are part of the bundle of sticks and property rights, we are not faced with a situation here where property rights are being stripped without compensation. I'll point to my comments at the last hearing, but the ability to develop those minerals remains. Reasonable regulations simply do not constitute a taking, nor does the quote, lifetime of blood, sweat, and personal and professional sacrifice in these wells create additional property rights. Moreover, in that same argument, Renegade notes that the acquisition of these leases came under a different regulatory regime, but that does not negate the need to adhere to this regulatory regime. Perhaps most notable, some of the wells at issue are located on the Lowry Ranch. We have gone through a lot of hearings and public comment recently on the public concern for impacts from oil and gas operations in this area, and I want to make sure that the rules are strictly complied with, particularly for older wells. I think it's appropriate to address in this conjunction the concerns over public health is the reason that the Third Creek gathering system was decommissioned in the first place. As indicated by Anadarko at the time of the shutdown, the pipeline was shut down for safety reasons. As demonstrated by numerous contemporary articles, the Third Creek system handled relatively small volumes of gas, but needed significant upgrades to maintain requisite safety requirements, upgrades that were not commensurate with the volumes transported. Additionally, these safety concerns were highlighted as this was contemporaneous with the explosion in Firestone. The operators who utilized the system were notified well in advance of the proposed shut-in to look for other opportunities. Even Mr. Ingve stated in an interview at that time that, quote, the system was very outdated and pieced together using steel and poly pipe, but it lacked the plating that is currently necessary. Given the safety issues attendant to the operation of the Third Creek system, the continued blame of that decommissioning and desire to continue to use the pipeline is extremely concerning and demonstrates a lack of intent to ensure protection of public health, safety, welfare, the environment, and wildlife resources. Next, I'd like to move to the legal arguments. The basic tenet of Renegade's argument is patently false. In its application, Renegade suggests that Rule 903 D5 permits all flared gas from producing wells to be combusted in an enclosed device equipment with an auto-igniter or continuous pilot light with a design destruction efficiency of at least 98% for hydrocarbons. And Renegade meets or exceeds the Rule 903 D5 for all subject wells by combusting said wells with an enclosed device and an auto-igniter. Therefore, it asserts it's compliant with Rule 903D and 903E regarding gas produced by all subject wells. This is inaccurate. Rule 903D1 unequivocally states that after the commencement of production operations, venting or flaring of natural gas is prohibited, save 6 enumerated exceptions. The remaining provisions of 903D, i.e. D2 through D5, only apply if one of those exceptions are met. such as an upset condition during maintenance or under an approved gas capture plan. Consequently, if flaring is permitted under 903D1, then flaring must be conducted with the requisite high-efficiency equipment. Renegade's attempt to ignore the remaining provisions and structure of 903D is disingenuous at best. In other words, saying that they meet the 98% efficiency rate and therefore they're compliant with 903D is wrong. Next, Renegade suggests that Rule 903D is invalid. The argument here becomes convoluted, but nonetheless incorrect. Ultimately, Renegade argues that Rule 903 is ultra vires, or beyond our jurisdiction, for two reasons. First, the AQCC has exclusive jurisdiction over venting and flaring as related to public health and safety. And two, because venting and flaring are not per se waste under the Oil and Gas Conservation Act. I'll address each of these arguments. First, the AQCC's alleged exclusive jurisdiction with respect to public health and safety. Here, Renegade proffers that the AQCC's jurisdictional statement excludes ECMC's jurisdiction over air pollution from oil and gas facilities because of the word notwithstanding. This interpretation is incorrect and nonsensical. As stated in the Statement of Basis of Purpose for Rule 903, ECMC has 5 independent bases to regulate venting and flaring. They are an integral component of oil and gas production operations. It has authority to regulate safety risks posed by venting and flaring. It has authority to regulate odors caused by venting and flaring. It has authority to regulate because of the public health impacts and because venting and flaring constitutes waste. In its legislative grant of jurisdiction, ECMC has authority to enact rules necessary to carry out the statutory mandates, but does not have the authority to alter, impair, or negate the authority of AQCC to regulate emission of air pollutants and from oil and gas operations. In its legislative grant of jurisdiction, AQCC is required to promulgate, quote, emission control regulations in conformity with Section 25.7.109. Pursuant to Section 25.7.109, subsection 10, the AQCC must promulgate, quote, rules to minimize emissions of methane and other hydrocarbons, volatile organic compounds, and oxides of nitrogen from oil and gas, natural gas exploration and production facilities, and natural gas facilities in the processing, gathering, and boosting, storage, and transmission segments of the natural gas supply chain. The statute goes on to say that the Commission should look at leak detection, monitoring, and maintenance requirements. As illustrated in Renegade's application, AQCC has done this by establishing emission standards and requiring, amongst other things, efficiency control limits on separators and combustion devices. Finally, Section 25.7.109C sets forth the provision that Renegade suggests eliminates ECMC's jurisdiction over venting and flaring as related to public health. It states that, quote, notwithstanding the grant of authority to the Energy and Carbon Management Commission in Article 60 of Title 34, including specifically Section 3460.105.1, the Commission may regulate air pollution from oil and gas facilities listed in subsection 10A of this section, including during pre-production activities, drilling, and completion. 2 key points here. First, nothing indicates that AQCC is given jurisdiction specifically over venting and flaring. Second, and far more important, the provision states that the AQCC may regulate air pollution from oil and gas facilities. Permissive language such as this cannot be read as an exclusive grant of jurisdiction. Regardless, Renegade's argument focuses on the word notwithstanding. Relying on a case discussing an exception to a standard statute of limitations, Renegade argues that notwithstanding excludes ECMC's jurisdiction over air pollution from oil and gas facilities, including during pre-production drilling and completion stages, leaving ECMC only to regulate waste. This strained interpretation selectively utilizes and omits words and fails to follow proper statutory interpretation. First, as noted above, the legislature said AQCC may regulate air pollution, not that it, as Renegade said, it does regulate air pollution. Nor does it state that AQCC jurisdiction supersedes any ECMC jurisdiction. And most notably, it does not say only the AQCC has jurisdiction over public health issues. Second, notwithstanding does does exclude ECMC's exclusive jurisdiction. It specifically allows for AQCC to promulgate emission reduction regulations despite ECMC having primary jurisdiction over oil and gas operations. Third, had the legislature intended for the AQCC to regulate any air emissions and not ECMC, it would have said so. As discussed in the statement of basis and purpose, there are other instances where sole jurisdiction was expressly granted by the legislature. ECMC's statutory mandate requires the Commission to regulate the development and production of natural resources of oil and gas in the state of Colorado in a manner that protects public health, safety, and welfare, including protection of the environment and wildlife resources, and to protect the public and private interest against waste in the production and utilization of oil and gas. This language would be superfluous and meaningless if AQCC and not ECMC had sole jurisdiction to regulate with respect to public health. Simply put, it's clear that both commissions have jurisdiction over oil and gas operations. ECMC has the power to make and enforce rules to, quote, do whatever is necessary to carry out the Oil and Gas Conservation Act, and AQCC may regulate oil and gas facilities consistent with its mandate to minimize emissions. Had Renegade truly thought that this commission did not have jurisdiction over venting and flaring, it would have and could have appealed our decision the last time we denied the same variance request. Second, Renegade argues that venting and flaring is not per se waste. Renegade relies on a 1955 case that stated the commission did not have authority to require an operator to re-inject all gas back into the formation, and noting that by definition, waste is the escape, blowing, or releasing of gas into the air in excessive or unreasonable amounts. That is still true today, and nothing in our rules suggests to the contrary. The definition today is the same. Waste with respect to gas includes the escape, blowing, or releasing directly or indirectly into the open air of gas from wells productive of gas only, or gas in an excessive or unreasonable amount from wells producing oil or both oil and gas. Save that now, non-production is necessary to protect public health is not waste. Our regulations do allow for venting and flaring in limited circumstances, and when permitted, are subject to additional restrictions, including the equipment emission reduction standards created by the AQCC. That venting and flaring is not per se waste does not mean that the promulgation of Rule 903D was invalid. It simply was created the parameters for what excessive and unreasonable meant, particularly given the technological advances we are privy to today that were not available in 1955. Again, had Renegade truly thought that 903 was invalid, it could have and should have appealed the denial of the variance last February. Finally, I must address the comparison drawn by Renegade between ECMC's regulation of venting and flaring to prior BLM regulations regulating greenhouse gas emissions under the guise of waste. There, the Clean Air Act gave the EPA, and only the EPA, authority to regulate air emissions. So BLM was found to not be allowed to regulate venting and flaring as waste when the jurisdiction lied elsewhere. As explained above, this is not the case here. Finally, I'll turn to the application itself. I want to first start with the good faith efforts. The current application still blames Third Creek shutdown for turning Renegade from a, quote, thriving small operator to losing 67% of its production and gross revenue. Again, Renegade details its efforts which do not demonstrate good faith, reducing staff, adjusting expenditures, mortgaging properties, and tapping into retirement savings. The applicant acknowledges that the commission did not agree with the relevance or weight of Renegade's evidence in the past application, but states that its wells are, quote, in compliance with the rule, meaning Rule 903. As stated above, this is simply wrong. Renegade goes on to argue that it is attempted to find economic, operational, and legal solutions to avoid combusting and has not been idle or dilatory in evaluating or undertaking to implement a solution to the abandonment of the Third Creek gathering system. While I don't believe Renegade has been idle, I do not think suing to reactivate the gathering system is a good faith effort, nor does taking out a mortgage or firing people demonstrate that an operator is doing everything possible. Renegade goes on to identify some additional efforts that have been made. It says it investigated on-site electric generation. There is simply no detail provided on this effort, only that state statutes controlling electric supply make this non-commercial. Without detail, I can't judge whether this was actually a good faith effort. It also looked at Bitcoin mining. This is a common effort for beneficial use, but again, there's not much detail here. Renegade acknowledges that regulatory hurdles exist, but I have not heard any efforts to resolve this situation or how long resolution may take. Moreover, when you look at the comments from local governments, Adams County, which I must specify here, I don't rely on Adams County's public comment as part of my decision, rather as more of a form of judicial notice, has noted that Renegade has not filed applications for permits to conduct mining in that jurisdiction. This demonstrates a lack of prudence and good faith effort contrary to what is alleged, quote, diligent and persistent attempts to find a solution. Even by his own admission today, Mr. Ingve indicated that they want to combust while they determine if other options could be beneficial, such as crypto mining. This is putting the cart before the horse. They said that the commission isn't the appropriate place to determine whether the use is appropriate, but I disagree. We aren't determining whether it's possible, legal or otherwise, to get permits from local governments, but as Commissioner Oath put it in the questions previously, we need to understand whether we are pushing that issue down the road in an exercise in futility. Next, Renegade also sought to reactivate the Third Creek gathering system. Renegade acknowledges that a new gathering system would be uneconomic, so it instead seeks to reuse a very old gathering system. There's not enough detail here to demonstrate that this is good faith, particularly when, as described above, the reason that it was decommissioned was because of safety issues. And there's no different than what has been previously done, which were not found to be good faith efforts. Finally, Renegade mentioned that it is discussing trying to use GMT's new pipeline or the Bronco pipeline or the Tenderfoot pipeline. Despite Renegade's suggestion that reactivating Third Creek is the best solution, I think these would be the best solutions. But the, quote, end stage of finalizing agreements that they talked about in their application simply mean nothing. We need details. Today, Renegade even suggested that there has not yet been a dialogue with some of these operators on potential solutions. Only a small bit of detail was provided related to the use of the infrastructure on the Lowry Ranch cap, which they still don't have any certainty on. And instead of waiting to confirm what their infrastructure will look like. If there is an agreement in place, utilize the time that you have an agreement to and then come back to us. The last point also goes to the time requested for this variance. Renegade seeks 2 years here, but doesn't explain the need for 2 years. If they really are near finalizing an agreement for tie-in to some of these different operators' gathering systems, 2 years is unnecessary. Given past acts, to me, this just seems to be another opportunity to continue business as normal until such time as Renegade can raise the same arguments it has always raised in another application for a variance in the future. Next, I also want to touch on the no net adverse impacts. They suggest that there are no net adverse impacts because the volume of gas is minimal. Again, they don't really provide support here, just a statement. The volume of gas is no different than the allowances that are permitted in 903. The gas will be combusted further in the production stream, regardless of whether it's combusted now. And wells in the area are already orphaned, so emissions have actually been reduced, kind of an offset argument. I find it difficult to believe that I even have to address these arguments, but wells in the area being orphaned does not make it all right to admit here. The other instances in 903 are temporary in nature, not continuous, and downstream combustion is not a reason to allow you to vent or flare. Similarly, Renegade argues that it is combusting and not flaring. Again, this is simply wrong and not a good faith argument. Arguments such as these frankly come off as demeaning to the work done by the Commission to establish rules to protect public health, safety, welfare, the environment, and wildlife resources. At bottom, I think it's clear that despite 7 years now since the Third Creek system was talked about being shut down, no real efforts have been made to make any changes to resolve the issue of whether of allowing venting and flaring. Ultimately, what we see here is exactly what Mr. Ingve talked about, and that is we could build a pipeline of our own, but we want to wait and see what other people are doing. Our job in this variance here is not simply to allow additional time for the operator to maybe figure out what could be possible down the road. They have had numerous years to figure out what needs to be done, And the fact that it hasn't been done up to this point in time shows that there has not been a good faith effort. Therefore, I do not find that they meet the requirements of Rule 503, and I would not be in favor of granting a variance.
Thank you, Commissioner Cross, for initiating deliberations with thoughtful comments. Others with deliberative thoughts? Commissioner Messner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be brief, as Commissioner Cross has shared a lot of similar sentiments that I had in my notes associated with this, particularly the citing of the rules and the statement of basis and purpose regarding jurisdiction and applicability of the rules for this particular application. As I'm looking at this, I'm looking specifically at Rule 502C and whether the applicant has met the requirements associated with the variance application. And I'm focusing particularly on 1 and 2 that are part of 502C. And in this particular instance, I'm struggling to find evidence. I think most of the statements that are indicated in both gas capture plan and testimony and application itself are unfounded. There's just no evidence that items or plans identified in the gas capture plan are viable. So I find those claims to be unfounded. I think there's no evidence in any of the submitted materials that the land use approvals for beneficial use are imminent or possible or even have been applied for. And so I don't know, as the testimony provided or the evidence provided shows that this is even a viable option in their gas capture plan. There's no evidence regarding communication or commitments or even emails shared regarding pipelines. So again, I think any testimony or evidence or statements made regarding potential connection to pipelines are just unfounded. And so, like Commissioner Cross, I think 6 or 7 years has passed, which created an opportunity for this applicant to make progress, but little or no progress has been made. And again, no clear showing of efforts made towards compliance, either with considerations within their gas capture plan or even good faith effort to comply in this application associated with Rule 502C. So I think my conclusion is if the applicant would have spent more time providing evidence showing good faith efforts towards compliance over the last 6 years, rather than focusing the majority of their application on thin legal arguments over jurisdiction, that this could have been a different result. But again, I find the applicant has not met their burden to show good faith efforts to comply, and that the requested variance, nor that the requested variance will not violate the basic intent of the act. And so I can't be in support of the variance as submitted.
Thank you, Commissioner Messner. Others with thoughts? Commissioner Oath?
I too can be brief, and thank you, Commissioner Cross in particular, and also Commissioner Messner for laying out and articulating in great detail your thoughts on this. I come to the same conclusion. I ultimately find that the applicant here has not met their burden of proof and cannot be in support of the variance request for the reasons that have been stated.
Commissioner Ackerman?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I will also be very brief. I don't have anything to add. My notes were encapsulated and more by the comments before me, but share the same sentiment. Thanks.
And I would agree with my fellow commissioners that I believe the variance should be denied. I would also point out that at least from this commissioner's perspective, my coming to the conclusion that the variance should be denied is based upon an inability to carry the burden of proof by the applicant and is not based upon any information submitted by any of the public comment as was submitted by Adams, Arapahoe, and Commissioner Penter. I believe that that public comment was not relevant to whether the 5 criteria variance criteria were met. And just wanted to clarify that point for the record. So with that, I would move, well, actually, before I do that, AG Davenport, could you visualize yourself? AG Davenport, I was about to make a motion to deny the variance. Does action by the commission, since it seems we have consensus along this, is that all that needs to happen? Does there need to be anything further with regard to what that variance denial then implicates for the applicant with regard to the wells in question?
Chair, I believe simple denial of the variance request is sufficient, and the consequences that will flow from that will be dictated by the rules. I don't believe that the commission needs to outline what consequences denial of the variance may have.
Okay, then based upon the deliberative thoughts from all 5 commissioners, I would move to deny the variance.
Second.
Motion and a second. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the variance is denied. Mr. Campbell and Mr. Ingve, appreciate the presentation. The commission has spoken on this matter. Commissioners, I believe that covers the matters that were on our agenda for today. Seeing no further action required, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you, folks. See you next week.